Good evening. This meeting of the Board of Education for September 23rd, 2013 is called to order. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone present and to our television viewers. All items that will be voted on this evening have been posted as required by state law. This meeting is being televised live and will be replayed throughout the next 2 weeks. Please check the board website for replay times. It is also being streamed live on PPS's website and will be archived there for future reference if you are so interested. Just like to note that Director Adkins this evening is absent. Tonight we get to recognize some of our community partners, and we are so thankful that you are here and able to join us. Our partners are vital to the work we do at Portland Public Schools and obviously very much appreciated. I'd like to ask Lorenzo Poe and Melissa Goff to step forward to the testimony table.
Good evening, Chair Blau and Board and Superintendent Smith, Lorenzo Poe, Chief Equity Officer and Partnership Director. Tonight, we will once again recognize one of the many partners who give of their time, resources, and volunteers to contribute to the academic success of our students. We're really excited about tonight's partnership because it helps us extend into the classroom. And so with that as an overlay, recognizing that this is one of many opportunities over through the year that we will get a chance to reach out and recognize those partnerships, again, who give so much to help make sure that our district is able to help support the students in Portland Public Schools. So with that, let me turn this over to Melissa Goff and Andre Jackson, who are going to introduce our partnership tonight.
Thank you.
Andre.
And I've got it. Thank you, members of the school board and Superintendent Smith, for this opportunity to recognize this unique collaboration between OHSU Dornbecker Children's Hospital and Randall Children's Hospital at Legacy Emmanuel to bring health-related supplemental instructional resources to our teachers and students. OHSU Dornbecker Children's Hospital and Randall Children's Hospital at Legacy are underwriting the cost to make the online resource healthteacher.com available. Health Teacher is an online resource of health education tools, including lessons, interactive presentations, and physical activity games to integrate health into any classroom subject area at all grade levels. This supplemental resource will be available to PPS teachers who choose to use it in any subject area, not just health. Use of the Health Teacher resource is in no way required, but we believe it will be a valuable added tool for teachers who are looking to integrate health messages and lessons into everything from science to social studies. We have been working with these outstanding partners for several months to put this together. I would particularly like to call out the work of Andre Jackson and deeply appreciate their collaboration for the good of our students. Now, to say a few words about the partnership, I would like to introduce, and I'm going to ask them to come take these 3 chairs as I stand up and let them speak. Ed Fitzgerald, the Director of Special Projects for Health Teacher. Wayne Clark, the Vice President of Marketing and Communications for Randall Children's Hospital at Legacy Emmanuel. And Jody Combs, Vice President of Women and Children's Service, OHSU Dornbecker Children's Hospital. If you could come forward and say a few words.
Thank you all very much. I'm Ed Fitzgerald with Health Teacher, and we are very pleased to be part of this partnership and to provide this incredible resource to your teachers. Along with the license fee and all the associated costs with that, the sponsors are also providing ongoing training and support for the entire duration. So there will be a local person here who will do training and support for the entire duration. So that's kind of a unique part of this partnership, and we're very proud of the partners we have here. So you also have a packet tonight. In that packet there are some explanations about Health Teacher and GoNoodle, including an entire scope and sequence that shows some 325 lesson plans and the activities that we use as brain breaks in the classroom. So we'll be rolling this out with the teachers as quickly as possible, and we hope to see lots and lots of usage there.
Hello all, it's good to be here. My name is Cindy Hill, and I'm the nurse executive for Randall Children's Hospital at Legacy Emmanuel, and I am not Wayne Clark. So but I would like to point out, Wayne Clark is here with us. He is the Vice President of Marketing and Communications for Legacy Health. Sitting next to Wayne is Pamela Weatherspoon, and she is our community relations individual for Randall Children's Hospital at Legacy Emmanuel and Legacy Emmanuel Medical Center. So thank you so much for having us here. And again, we're privileged to have the opportunity to work as partners with OHSU Dornbecker to bring this program to you. I, in fact, practiced one of the modules on the weekend, and I need to bone up on a few things, like how much sleep children need. Even though I was quite surprised. Anyway, but Randall Children's Hospital, Legacy Emmanuel, and Legacy Health are proud of this partnership with both Health Teacher, Portland Public Schools, and OHSU Dornbecker. Portland Public Schools has outstanding teachers and innovative health teacher programs which will be able to teach students to be healthy, happy, and active. And I want to emphasize active. There's a strong component that Randall Children's Hospital has been placing in the last few years on activity as the obesity rates in our nation and children continue to rise. It'll encourage students to adopt healthy behaviors benefiting them through the school years and into adulthood. We know for sure, as the evidence is there in the literature, that healthy children are more likely to become healthy adults. Randall Children's Hospital is devoted and has been devoted for caring for children in our community and in the region since about 1960. I've had the privilege to be with Randall Children's Hospital since 1979, and our commitment to healthy environments and healthy lifestyles for children continues. Randall Children's Hospital and Legacy have a long-lasting commitment with our community partners on fostering health education and healthy literacy. Health Teacher embraces kids understanding their health and making healthy choices. We're excited for the partnership and thank our partners, Health Teacher and OHSU Dornbecker, for giving us the opportunity to be a part of this. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jody Coombs. I'm the Vice President for Women and Children's at Dornbecker Children's Hospital at OHSU, and I am thrilled and honored to be here this evening and to again celebrate and this collaboration both with Randall Children's and Healthy Teachers in the Portland Public School. I'd like to acknowledge two of our Portland Public School teachers here in the audience that teach up at OHSU. That's Heidi Warden and Lisa Toole. We're thrilled to be able to work every day and watch them teach the kids who are hospitalized and extend that out past, through the school systems that you all have here. And our mission and passion really is around improving the health and well-being of children in Oregon and beyond. And this is such a exciting and thrilling opportunity to be able to partner and see this come to fruition as we look at the health and well-being of children of our state. And we're excited and just overall thrilled. And I'd like to thank you all for supporting us as we join hands and trying to really make sure that the kids of Portland get the didactics and the curriculum to stay active and healthy. So thank you very much.
Thank you all very much for being here. Again, we really appreciate all the support, our partners, and this is just a great example of one partnership, and we couldn't do all the work that we do without you. At this time, I'm going to call all the folks from your organizations together, or up to front. I'm going to read what the plaque that we're going to present you with this evening says, and then we'll take a photo in front of the dais, so we'll take a little minute. So I haven't say the same thing. So one's being presented to Wayne Clark, not Cindy. Wayne Clark with Legacy Health, and the other's being presented to you, Jody, at Dornbecker Children's Hospital. And it says, in recognition and appreciation of your contributions to the students and staff at Portland Public Schools. And it says, September 23rd, 2013, Carol Smith, Superintendent, Greg Belisle, and Pam Knowles, co-chairs. So come on up and congratulations. Thank you.
fold in, if you would please. Showing you some. I'm a Tom. Tom, if you can fit with me. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Right. One on the iPhone for Twitter, hold on. Claudia's here. Now as I fall back for a second. One more. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Now we will move on to the superintendent's report. Superintendent Smith.
Okay, so first 2 weeks of school, Sue Ann Higgins, our Chief Academic Officer, and I got to be out in 35 of our 85 schools, and it was totally an awesome start to the school year, I'm just going to say. And it is, it's really clear. Just school communities were in really positive mode. I had such wonderful conversations with our custodians who were totally proud of the floors that were really buffed and ready for kids to be back. Kids come just ready for school, and I felt that across the board at every single school I visited. We had parents out greeting kids as they were coming in the door, principals out greeting kids, and I got to go be in a fire drill. I got to be in a back-to-school assembly. We had corn fests, we had barbecues. We just had whole community coming around to welcome kids back to school, and it was awesome. The one thing I will tell you, the front office staff that I checked in with in every single building we visited, we are now converting to Synergy, so our old student data system is no longer available to us. We're all converting to a new system, Synergy. And the thing I will say, everybody was reporting like the snafus and the things that were not going smoothly. However, to a person, people were in good problem-solving mode. So I'm really just expressing my thanks and appreciation for the people's patience in moving to a new system. But awesome beginning of a school year. I think just about as smooth as we possibly could have hoped for. So that was wonderful. Our project Community Care, which is really where the whole community comes together to get grounds and buildings ready to welcome kids back to school. We had 6,594 volunteers in 64 schools, and grounds looked beautiful, and I heard commitments in different schools about here's how we're going to maintain this and keep how beautiful it looks right now as the year goes on. So let's just say Yahoo, and a big round of appreciation both to folks who donated materials and supplies for us, bark dust, the kinds of things that go into actually beautifying, and the blood, sweat, and tears that were poured into the schools that day to welcome kids back to school looking snazzy. We also completed our first round of bond work on the schools. So this summer we had crews that were fixing leaking roofs and making schools safe against earthquakes. So we replaced and did roof repair at Alameda, Bridal Mile, Laurelhurst, Lewis, and Wilson. And the thing that is amazing about this is the short window of time to, literally the school year ends, ramp up crews. Wilson alone is 3 acres of rooftop that has to be completed in a very short window of time, and then really there's no squishware, and we've got to be ready for kids to be back in school, all completed, on time, on budget, with kids able to be back in school. That's a pretty awesome looking project when you look at Wilson from the air. But this is the first installment on our bond project, and as you know, a $482 million PPS school building improvement bond. So we're entering the planning phases for the modernization of Franklin and Roosevelt. Grant will be soon on the heels of that, and then also the planning for the Fabian K-8. So that was all off to a great start, and it was really wonderful to be able to see the completion in time for the first day of school to welcome kids back. So that was a woohoo too. We also, part of that was also science classrooms at Laurelhurst K-8 and Ockley Green campus of the Chief Joseph Ockley Green K-8 school. So that was exciting for those schools. Friday, not part of the bond, but part of a project that's been in motion for 10 years, we celebrated the completion of the Grant track and field and inaugurated that field for their first game. And Carol Campbell, principal, is sitting in the back row here. Woohoo! And they won their first game played on that new turf. Wahoo! Yay! And actually, I'm going to bring photos for my next superintendent's report because it was a really magnificent ceremony and a true testament to partnership over a lot of years and a lot of perseverance. So this was deep involvement of the school district, City of Portland, Parks and Rec, Nike, and then Friends of Grant Athletics, which has been a community group that's really been the engine to keep the eye on the ball and make sure this thing came to completion. We had a number of people gathered, a number of the principals who've been part of it over the 10 years, and it was a really grand celebration and inauguration. So congratulations, Carol, and to the whole Grant community. And you can see the T-shirts, actually Andrew and Pam sporting from the celebration of the day. Another exciting thing this summer was we had an expansion of our early kindergarten transition program, which has been a really successful program for our pre-kindergarten kids to practice what kindergarten will be, and for their parents to actually practice what it is to go to school, and how do you have school-going behaviors, and how do you leave your mom in the morning to go to school. I mean, it's totally an awesome program, but we had this going on this summer at Harrison Park, Jason Lee, James John Woodmere, and Lent K-8. We had parents who attended weekly sessions, and we're looking at trying to continue to expand it. And we now have other districts who are replicating this model. So this started in PPS, and it's now being replicated in other districts. Partners in this effort include Head Start, Home Forward, IRCO, the Immigrant and Refugee Center of Oregon, Multnomah County Library, Sun Community Schools, Ready for Kindergarten Program, and Multnomah County. So again, a true testament to our work with our partners in terms of providing great services to our families and kids. And it was a blast to go visit this program. The kids were just so excited about school. So. Reconnections campaign. This is another one. We're in our third year of doing a Reconnections campaign, which means we have a group of, this year it was 40 PPS staff and community volunteers who on September 14th, on a Saturday, went out to knock on the doors of kids who had not yet showed up for school. So were enrolled last year and hadn't yet returned to school. And folks go out and knock on doors and invite them back. And this year, we had 81 students who were contacted directly and invited to come on back to school. This has made a huge difference in the last couple of years, and we've had some really powerful stories of kids and the difference it made to have someone come to their door and say, come on back. And I think we're showing a short video about that day.
Once I really hit high school, there was a multitude of reasons, but I would probably say I wasn't really challenged at the high school I was at the time. And it just seemed like, there was a lot of funner things that I could be doing. Essentially, I had a revelation junior year, once I had been dropped out for about 6 months. And I realized that all my so-called friends weren't really doing much in life. And I always had dreams and aspirations of being somebody, being a professional in whatever field it may be. Vice Principal Lavert Robertson at Franklin High School recommended a military high school to me, the Oregon Youth Challenge Program. After I successfully completed the program, I came back to the Reconnection Center, and that's when I met Suzanne Cash Phelps, one of the student outreach coordinators, and we really bonded, and she really helped me decide to go to a smaller high school instead of a Franklin High School where I probably would have had other distractions. They really, got up in your face and said, hey, how are you? How was your day?
I ended up leaving school a couple months before my freshman year ended, and some of the reasons were because I had some bad influences around me, some friends that were skipping school and doing other things. I wasn't really good at some of the subjects at school, and I was failing. Some of the teachers were trying to help me out more, but I was kind of pushing them away. It was actually Dennis. He was the one that helped me. He kept constantly coming to my house, calling me just about to go back to school, to do my best, and some of that motivation just he told me a lot of stories he had had struggles in school too, and it kind of just like motivated me to like do what he did, because he has a really good job right now, and that's kind of what I want to do.
So everybody had already started sports. Everybody already had knew each other. So I had a hard time making new friends, and my grades started going down. I left home when I was 17 years old, and I moved in with a friend, and reality, you know, basically caught up with me. I dropped out. One of my friends actually told me about Portland Knight High School. That program did so much for me. I made a lot of good connections with my teachers. The best part about it is just the small environment, like the one-on-one with my teachers, but it's like family, like they care about you. Me and my friend came back to visit Portland Knight School. She had graduated, and my friend started talking about how many credits I had. I think I only needed like 2 credits, and Cheryl overheard. And she was like, "What? You need to come back to school right now. Give me your number. Let's get her done." And ever since then, she was just on top of me throughout the whole process.
There are quite a few students that have life outside of going to school, and it can take over. And they just need someone to push them.
So now I'm going to be looking at school. We're thinking of PSU for the criminal law program.
You can do it, or run her from here to there so she could drop off paperwork or make a payment or whatever. She walked across the stage in June, and we were all there to say yes, yes.
And actually, I believe Director Bobby Regan participated in that campaign too, the Door Knocking campaign, as well as a number of our staff and volunteers from the community. So thank you for participating in that. Huge meaning for the students that are coming back to school. So we really appreciate your effort. I'm going to thank our partners for their contribution to our wellness efforts. This is, again, a district-wide wellness effort, and we'll be doing in an upcoming meeting our annual report to the board on progress on our wellness policy. We've had a couple things that are an update. Last year, we had a pilot Wellness Works program that we did in 44 of our schools. And this is really targeting employee wellness, and it actually was available to 3,200 of our staff this past year. So we had Healthy You teams that were at various schools, and also in central offices where people were working on drinking water, using pedometers, walking, gaining their steps. We kicked off this year's with a walk that Timber Joey came and did with us around the BESC. But part of what we're trying to do is really just introduce activity and healthy habits in the workplace. So this year, we're going to kick that off to be available to all 6,500 of our employees. It includes Whole Foods offering nutrition classes to our employees, fitness classes that are offered at district sites around the district, stress management activities, and the ability to participate in Healthy You teams. And what we're really trying to do is just promote a healthy work environment. We had Portland Public Schools was recognized as a fit-friendly company in Portland by the American Health Association My Heart, My Life initiative, which was part of how we happened to have Timber Joey here leading the walk with us, which was part of trying to kick off and say, how do we get this being a really part of our organization-wide culture? In our nutrition world, we have now got the Oregon Department of Education Child Nutrition Program certified all PBS nutrition service menus are now meeting the new higher U.S. Department of Agriculture requirements of the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act of 2010. And the ODE certification provided reimbursement of 6 additional cents per lunch. That sounds little. It actually makes a big difference in terms of what we're able to provide for kids. The new certified menus continue to provide delicious, high-quality, nutrient-rich meals that feature unlimited fruits and vegetables with lunches, whole grains, 1% low-fat, and non-fat milk, and lean entree choices. So we're really excited about that. A 2-year USDA Fresh Start Farm to School grant is also helping Nutrition Services increase our local purchasing and develop whole new grain breakfast items for all of our students. And the grant provides resources to connect school gardens with 2nd and 3rd grade classrooms and with cafeteria activities that support our Harvest of the Month and Oregon agriculture at some of our schools. So we're excited about that. And then finally, in terms of building healthy preventive habits, we had Target work with us on teaming up with our schools to improve the safety practices of employees as we were packing up at the end of last school year. And they then did a drawing of the schools that had no injuries over the course of the year. And we had 2 of our schools, Benson High School and Roseway Heights, who each received $1,000 to purchase educational materials and supplies. So again, it's another incentive to try and have us focusing on prevention and safety and just how do we do our work in a way that takes care of all of us. So thank you to Target, again, a partner who's working with Portland Public Schools. And then finally, I will just, our Human Resources Department produced, their equity team produced a new employee onboarding video that really talks about welcoming our new employees to Portland Public Schools and introducing them to our equity initiative. And I wanted to share that with all of you as a way of welcoming our new employees this year. Hi, I'm Carol Smith, Superintendent of Portland Public Schools, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our team. Whether you're in one of our schools, in central office, or part of one of our programs, you are part of the largest school district in Oregon. Our team of over 6,000 employees supports a diverse population of approximately 47,000 students in more than 100 schools and programs. We may not all work directly with students, but everything we do supports our mission. By the end of elementary, middle, and high school, every student by name will meet or exceed academic standards and will be fully prepared to make productive life decisions. Making our mission a reality requires dedication from everyone within our district, our board, staff, students, parents, and communities. Portland Public Schools is committed to academic excellence and personal success for every one of our students. Central to this commitment is educational equity.
We have, as a district, formulated a racial educational equity policy. We have a fair contracting policy, and all the work that we're doing to ensure that the district really means all kids' academic success.
It's clear, we want to reduce the dropout rate. We want to increase the graduation rate. We're focusing on equity, and we're also looking at the achievement gap.
The honor of having someone say to me, this is my best child, and I'm trusting that you will make sure that my child will have the best education.
It is an absolute joy to get up and come to work, even in the trying circumstances, because it is a place that while we are recognized that we don't have all the answers, we are working hard and diligently to get to that point, and we're seeing results for what we do, so it's an exciting time.
And I remember not having a lot of teachers that look like me, so it's really refreshing to be in a place where that is valued, where the population of teachers is starting to reflect the students more.
As we go into the world, we will see that it is a diverse world, and it's going to benefit all of us to be able to say we want to make sure that everybody has the best opportunities possible.
Diversity has been very much a benefit in my class. I'm very open to kids sharing their culture in class, and they're very proud to teach the class, how to count to 10 in Russian, or that they know different words in other languages. So it's very important for the students to feel that they're valued and can openly show other students their culture.
We're able to see that we all come to this building, and every building at PPS, wanting one thing, and that is to provide the best education we possibly can to all students.
Everybody is willing to pitch in. You know that if you fall, you've got a team behind you that can support you.
I'm more directly working with people to solve problems, and not just one person or one small group of people. And I've come to see, some amazing people who do some great work, and it's nice to be a part, of the team
I enjoyed it every day. Wintertime, summertime, fall, every day. It's even tomorrow. I'm looking forward to tomorrow. That's how much I like it. And I have no problem getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning, coming to work every morning.
We're all on the same page, and you get that sense of camaraderie and togetherness, and that's one thing I really enjoy about PPS.
How easy it is for me to make friends with everybody, to recognize people. And I always like to say good morning to you, and I always expect that in return. And that just makes it feel much better. It makes things go much easier every day.
Everything that is done is to try to approach those goals. So when you have clear goals and you work with good people, it's a great environment, and you love helping kids. That's why I became a cop, because I love to help people. How could you not love this job? It's incredible.
It's about the passion of kids and helping kids reach their maximum potential, recognizing that education is the best indicator of future success for all kids. So it is really about kids getting a solid, equitable education.
I know Portland Public Schools is doing something no other school system is doing in this country. It is very exciting to work here and be part of this change.
I would just add that for all those who are joining us, you're joining us at an incredible time, an incredible opportunity, with an incredible amount of work to do, but you're joining at a time with an incredibly good group of people who are committed to all kids learning, and welcome on board, and I hope and know you'll be as excited about PPS as I am.
I am very honored to work for this district, and I'm very happy to be here.
Maligayang pagdating sa Portland Public Schools. Welcome to Portland Public Schools.
欢迎来到我的学校 Welcome to my school.
Bienvenidos a mi escuela. Welcome to my school.
欢迎到波特兰学区 Welcome to Portland Public Schools.
Bienvenidos a las escuelas públicas de Portland. Welcome to Portland Public Schools. Yarte. Welcome to Portland Public Schools. Ram Ram. Welcome to PPS. Chào mừng quý vị đến với khu học chánh Portland. Welcome to Portland Public Schools.
Welcome to Portland Public Schools. We're excited to have you on our team. And with that, I just wish all of you a great start to the school year. So thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Smith. At this time, we're going to move on to student testimony. Ms. Houston, do we have any students sign up for testimony? No, we don't. No. Okay. Then we're going to move on to public comment. Do we have anybody signed up for public comment? Yes.
Our first two speakers, Jessica Thompson and Terrence Moses.
As you two are coming up, I'll read our instructions for public comment. We'd like to thank you very much for coming to share your opinions, your thoughts with us. We deeply value public input, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts, reflections, and concerns. Our responsibility as a board lies in actively listening and reflecting on the thoughts of others. The board will not respond to any comments or questions at this time, but the board or staff will follow up with various issues that are raised. Please make sure that you've left your contact information, either phone number or email, on the sign-up sheet. Guidelines for public input emphasize respect and consideration when referring to board members, staff, and other presenters. And while we value everyone's perspective, our rules do not allow criticism of individual staff members by name during public comment. You have a total of 3 minutes to share your comments. During the first two, a green light will appear. When you have 1 minute left, a yellow light will appear. When your time is up, a red light will appear and a buzzer will go off, and we ask that you respectfully wrap up your comments at that time. So with that, thank you very much for being here. And one of you may start.
Good evening, school board members and Superintendent Smith. The last time I was here before you, I was speaking solely as a parent concerned about the possibility of closing Chief Joe. Now I'm back as a Chief Joseph Ockley Green PTA board member. As a result of the merger of our two schools, we have brought different communities together and created one unity, community, and a strong, passionate PTA board. As well, we embrace our new environment. That experience has been mostly encouraging, and we have the hope for our future. It has been especially rewarding to see our kids adapt to all the changes in a graceful and accepting manner. The classroom environments are productive, and the mornings or halls are filled with the voices of teachers greeting kids and parents. To date, we have had 4 very successful attended joined attended, joined community events including back to school barbecue, PTA meeting, back to school night, and dance night. We have many more opportunities scheduled, and of course, you are all invited. Molly, Amber, and Jeb have worked hard in a short period of time to engage both communities, listen to feedback, and make changes as needed. If the first 3 weeks of school are any indication, we have the potential to achieve great things in the future and continue to surprise everyone. Both of our communities have gone through tremendous upheaval, faced challenges, and experienced emotional highs and lows. Many of us are still at different stages of acceptance as we continue throughout this process. However, we have made a concentrated effort as a community to take what was dealt to us and turn it into something great. Make no mistake, things are not the same, but we are creating a new normal every day, and many things are better than we imagined they would be. We all are well on our way to creating something special and unique, something that will not only benefit our children, but the future generations of North Portland children. Thank you.
Thank you.
Greetings, school board members and Superintendent Smith. My name is Jessica Thompson, JESSICATHOMPSON. It's an honor to be here to give feedback about the results of your vote last February to merge our two schools into Chief Joseph Ackley Green K-8, perhaps the state's only K-3 and 4-8 dual campus school. Although we have had many successes, we've also experienced struggle. They are as follows. The two major issues that we've come up against so far is one, the front office staff. We have incredibly amazing front office managers, one at Chief Joseph and one at Ackley Green. We also have a .7 support staff member, Ms. Nancy, who started last week and who I believe was hired through an all-hands-in equity grant. Our secretaries have to triage the needs of parents, students, teachers, and administrators, all this while monitoring the security of our front door entrances. This is an incredibly tough task, but imagine it at a new school that's essentially a dual campus. It has been so difficult for them, and they are handling it with such grace. But neither of our office managers are leaving much before 5 o'clock every day, and they're having to deal with a lot of different emotions and questions throughout the day. So if we could get some help from you on getting some help for them, it would be much appreciated. Secondly, we have some serious concerns about safety as far as our kids get into school. Because we have so many parents dropping off so many little ones in the classroom, and that's what happens when you have a 350 plus K3, we have a lot of traffic congestion, both at Chief Joseph and at Ackley Green. Additionally, now that the 4th and 5th graders moved up to Ackley Green, we lost our safety patrol at Chief Joseph, so the kids are having a hard time crossing Rosa Parks and Denver. Chief Joseph campus in particular is tucked away in kind of like a little sleepy neighborhood, and you have to cross some major streets to get there. The congestion created at both campuses because of buses, walkers, and parents dropping off is a real health and safety hazard for our children. Ideally, we, like many Jefferson cluster schools, would like you to hire professional crossing guards. In light of budget restraints, we know that this is highly unlikely. So instead, we're asking you to advocate immediately for a traffic study. We know that the transportation department is starting to work with Safe Route to Schools in the city, and we welcome this partnership. Our concern is the timeline. Please call Transportation Department and advocate for a traffic safety assessment and plan for keeping our kids safe during this period of transition. With 3 new administrators who are working diligently to problem solve, an engaged and committed family systems, and a PPS school board advocating for getting a traffic study done now for the well-being of our students, we know we can accomplish the goal of creating new procedures for getting our kids to school safely. Thank you for listening to our testimony.
Thank you. Thank you both for coming tonight.
Next, we have Bernie Bottomley and Eliza Earhart Eisen.
You can go ahead.
I'll go ahead and start. That'd be great. While she's coming down. Members of the board, Superintendent Smith, Bernie Bottomley with the Portland Business Alliance. Thank you for letting me visit with you for just a minute. I'd like to share with you briefly the results of a public opinion survey that we conducted this last July of 600 registered voters in Portland regarding their attitudes about education and Portland Public Schools. Not surprisingly, we found that Portlanders want all our children to be academically successful, involved, and responsible citizens, no matter what their ethnic background or household income. They want the school system not only to prepare students for life, but to help us foster a sense of community in our neighborhoods and in our city. Our survey shows that the values and objectives reflected in the board's contract offer reflect the values and the objectives of Portland citizens for their schools. And in many important respects, the survey also reflects the attitudes of households with public teachers as well. Our survey shows that Portlanders love and respect their teachers and want them to be treated fairly, and they want them to be paid in a way that reflects their value to the community. However, at the same time, Portlanders also see the need for significant changes in the existing labor contract. And I'd like to give you just a couple of examples. 2/3 of Portland residents support shifting to an 8-hour day to ensure that students have added instructional time. And in fact, 56% of households with public teachers also say that an 8-hour day is an important indicator of whether the district is providing a quality education experience. 2/3 of Portland residents also support updating the contract so we're not locked into how schools were working 15 years ago. More than 70% of Portland residents want to see the teacher hiring process change to prioritize hiring the most talented new teachers, not just those with several years of experience. In fact, households with public teachers agreed with this by a margin of 63%. More than 70% of Portlanders feel parent-teacher conferences are so critical that they should be held when parents can attend. 61% of households with public teachers agreed with that sentiment. And more than 73% of Portland residents agreed that in a fiscally constrained environment, the district should give teachers a small raise that is in line with projected state revenue and gives the district the ability to hire more teachers in future years. And 62% of households with public teachers agreed with that sentiment as well. The Alliance has reviewed both the district's contract offer and the proposal from the Portland Association of Teachers. We believe that the district's offer more closely reflects the community's views about how to achieve our aspirations for our schools and our students. The community wants changes from the current contract that will allow the district to put the very best teachers in every classroom. The message from our survey is clear. The status quo is not acceptable. We want to encourage the board to stay confident in knowing that the values and principles reflected in your contract offer are in line with those of the Portland community. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Eliza Earhart-Eisen, E-L-I-Z-A. Last name's E-R-H-A-R-D-T-E-I-S-E-N. Sorry, I know it's a mouthful. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Portland 80%ers for Educational Excellence, and one of our co-chairs has been present in each of the bargaining sessions all summer long. We might be crazy, committable, but we've been doing that. And we did it to monitor the impact of the contract on student achievement. And we have established 4 contract priorities that we feel are crucial to enhance student achievement and outcomes in Portland Public Schools. And we hope that as the negotiation process is proceeding, that you keep these priorities in mind. The first priority is to have great teachers in every classroom with specific contract language that enables professional growth through mentoring, evaluations, and professional development. Language that enables early hiring and allows final offers for new hires by the end of each school year so that PPS can hire the best available candidates who will have time to prepare for their assignments. Lastly, we strongly support incorporating the Oregon State Statute definition of competence as it applies to transfers, reductions, and layoffs. Our second priority is optimizing instructional hours. One of the current proposals now freezes instructional hours to the 2012-2013 standards, when most high school students' schedules did not comply with state-mandated instructional hours. At the barest minimum, the contract language on instructional hours must comply with the state statute. But really, instructional time needs to increase as much as possible to raise our graduation rates, close the gap, and improve our dropping test scores. The third priority is to enhance parent communication and engagement. The contract language must allow frequent and important communication to parents via online assignments, grade books, conferences, progress reports, report cards, and getting to see their own child's work. Parents can only partner with professional educators if they're aware of their students' progress and ways that they can help their students succeed. The last priority is to enhance volunteerism and community engagement. We have Portland 80%ers who are doing our part by serving on the K-3 Reading Initiative and on the Diploma in College and Career Initiative. But we need you to ensure that there isn't language in the contract that is a barrier to volunteerism, since volunteerism can support teachers and help increase student achievement. We recognize the very significant teacher workload issues which impact students directly too. We ask the district to be creative to address this issue. Perhaps a memorandum of understanding that most or certain percent of potential state funds or levy funds can go directly to hiring new teachers so that you get till you get to a targeted student-teacher ratio. We know we need more teachers to make class sizes more manageable to serve our kids better, but we also know the reality is there's a finite pool of dollars. But ultimately, the buck stops with you, the school board. We elect you to serve our community and our kids. You will settle this contract with the union, and we need you to reach an agreement not based on politics, not on the backs of our kids, but rather on what serves our kids best while supporting teachers well. We want you to hold our 4 priorities in mind when you're close to an agreement and verify that the decision you make serves our kids better. If you do that, we'll be here to back you up.
Thank you.
I'd really like that to be your legacy going forward.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Our last speaker is Greg Burrell.
Excuse me, my name is Greg Burrell, B-U-R-R-I-L-L, and I address you again today as an education stakeholder. I want to start by thanking Director Knowles, Director Regan, and Director Buell for coming by the PAT picnic. It was great to see you. And you know, I had these remarks prepared, but I've just seen and heard some things that make me want to change a little bit what I was going to say. Because basically I saw a wonderful commercial for how great Portland Public Schools is. It was inspiring to me. I didn't get a chance to work on my speech because in the school I subbed today there was an emergency. It took my planning time and then some to resolve it. So I apologize. But one of the things that I'm thinking as I watch this and I hear statements like, oh, we don't want to be locked into the way things were done 15 years ago, is that before the Great Recession, we were educating our kids with 80 cents on a dollar, what we had in 1990. And the Great Recession, I don't know what the new statistic is, but the class size, the things that are going on are the result of the lack of resources. And what I see over and over again at these meetings is people asking for you to give them a little more at somebody else's expense. It's time that we really do what's necessary to, well, for example, Director Buell, I know you remember what schools were like in the 80s before this happened. There are plenty of citizens that remember what they were like. And I want to envision a school system with the variety of course offerings we used to have, the bands, the orchestras, the sports programs, the foreign languages. But nowadays, for the 21st century, I'm looking forward to this cultural diversity in our workforce, more and better interventions like Reconnect, the best counselors, speech pathologists, nurses, psychologists, no onerous class sizes, no pupil loads, no unresolved grievances. So how about this? How about if we start with fewer central office personnel? For example, why can't our IT department be run by tech teachers who also run the department? Why can't TOSAs show how good they are by being in classrooms in addition to their special assignments? Why can't curriculum specialists take time off from teaching children to develop curricula that they will actually use in the classroom the following year? You get the idea. I am thrilled by the vision of education that students and teachers are sharing with me in my interviews for my book. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming to speak to us tonight. We are going to move on to the next item on our agenda, which are comments by the Portland Association of Principals and School Administrators, also known as PAPSA. Peyton Chapman, president of PAPSA, has requested a few minutes on our agenda this evening. Peyton, thank you for coming down to our speakers table. And I see a lot of administrators in the principals in the audience. If you're a principal or administrator in one of our buildings, could you please stand up, just so we have a sense? Thank you, and while you're standing up, I'm going to thank you for what seems to be a very smooth and effective start to school. So thank you. I know that being here tonight on what is the second Monday of the beginning of school is tough to be here, but thank you.
Thank you, Director Belisle. I'd also like to say it's nice PAPSA has not spoken before Director Buell and Director Kohler, so welcome. And I always feel so proud as a principal that we have a student on our school board and we're modeling civic involvement, and it's nice to see you, Director Davidson. Good evening, Superintendent Smith and members of the board. My name is Peyton Chapman, and I currently serve as the president of the Portland Association of Public School Administrators, also known as PAPSA. PAPSA represents administrators kindergarten through 12th grade, as well as principals who are serving in alternative schools and those on special assignment. PAPSA board and PAPSA membership are here tonight to show our support for our colleague principals who have been working hard to help negotiate a contract that supports students, student achievement, teachers, and high-quality instruction. We understand the hard work that teachers do every day in their classrooms, as we too were all once teachers. We also understand the needs of students and families who ask us for their help every day. We are here tonight to clearly communicate that when the principals on the bargaining team speak, they speak not just from their own perspectives, but from our collective perspectives with our many years of service and experience as both teachers and administrators. Principals and vice principals want to honor teachers' skills, needs, and talents. The current contract has too many barriers that make it difficult and sometimes impossible to hire and retain teachers with the right training and experience. This hurts teachers, and it hurts our students. Principals know that a more streamlined hiring process with just one hiring round would help us keep the talented teachers in whom we have invested time and resources. A more streamlined process would help us complete hiring earlier in the spring so that teachers would know where they will be teaching before the school year ends and have more time to think about their classes before school starts. This change would benefit teachers and students. When our principals have spoken on these kinds of issues, they have spoken for all of us who serve teachers and students in our schools. Principals know that our teachers need time to prep during the school day, but we also know that students and families need to be able to meet with their teachers during the regular school day. We know that parents must be our first partners and that families are crucial allies who can help teachers resolve academic issues, help teachers better understand a student's learning needs, and sometimes even share important information about what's going on at home. Counselors and administrators need to be able to schedule short meetings with teachers and families to review IEPs and 504 plans during or just after school. Currently, this is not possible. When our principals speak on these kinds of issues, they speak for all of us who have served as instructional leaders in our schools, as we are in service to our teachers and our students. We want to acknowledge and thank Charlene Williams, Ben Kiefer, and Marty Diaz for their leadership representing the needs of our students, our families, and our teachers in Portland Public Schools. Thank you, Superintendent Smith and members of the board, as well as PAT leadership, for all of your hard work on this contract. We all, as PAPSA members, hope that Portland Public Schools and PAT will be able to reach a negotiated agreement that allows us to better serve our teachers and our students and our families. Thank you, the PAPSA board.
Thank you very much for coming to join us this evening again. We really appreciate it. We're going to move on. We're going to move on to our next item on the agenda, educational specifications, high school area program. The first draft of the area program for comprehensive high schools and the district-wide educational specifications has been completed. Superintendent Smith, can you introduce this item?
Will. So Paul Cathcart, who's a project manager in the Office of School Modernization, and Jim Owens, the Office of School Modernization Executive Director, and John Weeks will be, of DAWA, who is part of putting this together, will be presenting this report.
Thank you, Superintendent Smith, and good evening, School Board. We're pleased tonight to present a report on the development of our educational specifications for the comprehensive high school area program. And I'd like to emphasize that this is a preliminary report. There may have been some confusion in terms of how the EdSpec work is developing. We're actually planning to go through each of the school configurations, starting, of course, with the high schools, then followed by our K-8 program, our middle schools, and then our K-5 schools. And then later in the fall, in December timeframe, we're expecting to come back again with a full presentation and a resolution to propose adoption of the area programs. So Paul Cathcart, project manager, has been working through the phase 1 work, which was our facilities visioning, and John Weeks with DAWA IBI Group are here to walk us through the area program. After they complete going through the material, we'll be happy to entertain any questions that you may have regarding the program. Paul?
Thank you, Jim. Paul Cathcart with Facilities and Asset Management. And as Jim said, I want to give you a brief overview of the educational specification project to date and how we have arrived at the area program overview. So, the development of educational specifications was a future step out of the long-range facility plan that the board adopted in May of last year. They're meant to be a set of facility guidelines that establish the way school buildings support programs and curriculum and establish baseline facility standards across the district.
Yeah, Mr. Cathcart, can you speak more into the microphone, or can we turn
Certainly.
it up? I think it's hard to. Thank you.
Appreciate the prompts.
Yeah.
As specific school sites approach significant modernization, the building design criteria, or the ed specs, will be tailored through a master planning process, such as what Franklin and Roosevelt high schools are going through at the moment, to suit the individual schools and the program and community through staff, student, and community engagement with the design professionals, which are currently in place for those two schools. This project has undergone a couple different phases, including the education facilities vision to guide the future design of school buildings. Last time I was before you, the board adopted that vision document. We are currently into the education specifications that'll be used by the design teams undertaking renovation of school buildings. So, our work to date on the ed specs is focused and designed primarily to work with teachers, administrators, and community partners to identify the character, the components, and the feel of comprehensive high schools. And again, as Jim said, we're focusing on high schools tonight. Other area programs will be forthcoming. So to date, we've also been working with PK8 teachers, and later this fall we'll be working with middle school and teachers administrators from the PK5 schools. So we're halfway through our focus group work process. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to John for a little bit to kind of talk about what we've heard through that process.
So what have we learned to date? And it is a basis by which the area program has been developed and is in front of you, is a series of conceptual ideas and characteristics of the school, and then the spaces that are desired to be in a comprehensive community high school in the future as Portland begins the wonderful task of modernizing Roosevelt, Franklin, and Grant. So here are some key themes that have emerged, by far not the only ones. Of course, there's an interest in more light and air. There's an interest in having a heart in the school, a place that is a center where all can gather, and there's a place within the school itself that can tell the story of the school. There's a real interest by kids for a place to hang and to collaborate and to come together, and in other words, a student-centered kind of environment. For teachers, there's a request for open office environments for them where they can be together outside the classroom on a daily basis, again, to team and collaborate. The cafeteria has been not only mentioned by the community in the envisioning process, but also by everybody in the schools themselves. That should not be such a surprise, but there is two themes about that. A cafeteria, as we know it, is not necessarily desired, more of a food court, a wonderful place to eat, a student union-like place in a high or a college, but also it has multiple uses to it, and it doesn't sit empty after 12 o'clock or before 10 o'clock every day. And last, in terms of the media center or the library, people are looking for a state-of-the-art place where information is stored, disseminated, and distributed across the school. The types and sizes of the spaces needed for a comprehensive high school is based on the following, in this document that's in front of you. One was it grew out of the high school redesign activity that the district went through a few years back and adopted. And two, both the core and the capacity, the core facilities for the high school and the capacity high school will be 1,500 students. The educational specifications, on the other hand, it helps to describe not only what those spaces are, how big those spaces are, but the nature and character and quality of each of those spaces that are in the school. Want to? Okay. Go ahead. So the area program identifies a series of components that are before you. One are classrooms for core and advanced programs as identified in the high school redesign. Two, there's an addition of smaller instructional spaces for a variety of activities that are currently not supported in the high school environment, but do need space for smaller activities and work that has to take place. Arts programs are maintained and strengthened in the program itself. Athletics, PE particularly, has been provided space within the school. Administrative and student support spaces is a component. That is not only the administrative spaces for principals, but counselors, SPED, and other programs that are within the school itself. And last, there's a component for community partnerships. That's both partners that come and work in the school or around the school, wraparound services, and those that are a part of your community that want space within the school itself.
Thanks. Thanks, John. I want to do some highlights of the area program that speak to kind of what we've heard through our conversations, but maybe also highlight some differences in opportunities to teach within schools that are, have the benefit of the district-wide ed spec. So the area program you'll see here in a minute has spaces for teacher offices for planning and collaboration, as John said. There'll be higher utilization of classrooms because of that. Again, teachers' ability to plan in a teacher office and collaborate with others. The intent is to use more of the classrooms more throughout the day. The design of the theater would be to seat 500 students or spectators for plays and other performances, and student assemblies would be designed to be held in the gym large enough to hold a full-on student assembly. And lastly, enhanced elective and CTE space options will be determined through the master planning process. Every comprehensive high school has a somewhat different CTE program or elective spaces, and through the master planning process, we'll elect what kind of program to pursue, and the spaces that will be there to support that will be different at every school. Oops. I apologize that this might be a little small to see, but I want to run you through a little bit of the area program. In the summary here, we talk about the core teaching spaces. The first column identifies the number of teaching spaces and the areas associated with them. Pardon me. the CTE elective spaces identified in the area program at this moment, it is kind of a bulk space of 6,000 square feet. A few more slides here, I'll get into some of the details of those programs. As John said, we're also providing spaces for partners in community use as well as wraparound services that are in our schools to support them. So with this draft, the total overall area comes to a little over 250,000 square feet. This slide talks about the core programs, English, math, social studies, and again, going back to the high school system design, the classes that were identified in that program to carry forward and to support high schools. Science labs, and that's general to include physics, chemistry, astronomy, and so forth. And finally, the teacher offices, about 20 staff per office, and that would include small office area and kitchenette and so forth to collaborate. Under fine performing arts, opportunities for 2 and 3D art, a band or orchestra room, and a choir room. As John said, we wanted the area programs brings forth what we heard through the visioning process and wanting to support those programs. Dance and theater, again, a theater for about 500 seats and supporting rooms and other uses for that particular program. This slide, we were asked many times to find opportunities for classrooms to do double and triple duty, so we've identified the advanced courses that are currently offered through many schools and programs, and noting that the core classes can support those spaces. Key thing to note about athletics here is 2 gyms, a large gym with track and an auxiliary or practice gym. As many people in high schools know, there's a lot of desire for gym use in those schools. The education support part of this, the part I will note here is a student center with able to serve about 600 students in one lunch, and again, provide opportunities for additional student and community gathering. So let me quickly look at the CTE program. We've identified or broken these up into 3 different kinds of spaces, unique spaces such as shops or sports medicine that'll have their own unique layout and equipment needs. There are other classroom type spaces that will be supportive of CTE or elective programs. Many of those are about the size of a normal classroom, but others are larger. And then finally, computer labs that would support specialized computers or software in support of a elective or CTE program. Through the partner community uses, we've identified office space for some of our partner, like the SUN program and so forth, provided them office space, which is always at a premium in our high schools. And under my apologies, this became small to read, but the 2 primary components for wraparound services are a health clinic and a teen parent services program that would provide infant care for teen parents. And while not included in the overall area total, we have looked at a few different options for STEM programs in high schools and tried to identify those spaces that could support both STEM as well as core or advanced programs. So that's, believe it or not, a quick overview of the area program. And as Jim said, we're happy to take any questions and any feedback you might have at this point.
Thank you. So this is our opportunity to talk about the area program and the ideas, concepts, and or what other questions we might have. Thank you. That's quantifying each of those pieces. I'm glad it's not my job, but I appreciate the work that goes into it. Director Reagan?
I wanted to ask Director Morton, you served on this Education Specifications Committee?
In part.
Oh, okay.
In part.
I wanted to see if you wanted to. Oh, okay. I wanted to kind of give you the opportunity to kind of share. Not really?
No.
Okay. Okay, sorry. So I had a couple of questions. Thank you very much. Sorry. First of all, I was really pleased to see that you have student spaces in the building in terms of like student government spaces. I thought that was awesome, and so I thank the group for coming up with that. I had a specific question about education specifications for the outside of the building, because when we were at the Roosevelt design meeting, and I don't know if this, Greg, came up at the Franklin design meeting, one of the things that we were asked to do was look at the outside of the building, and not only the fields and the rest, but also the outside learning spaces. And I don't know whether this group had an opportunity to kind of look at the campus also, or if you could comment on that.
We did receive some feedback from teachers and administrators both on what to do outside of the building. The area program is really designed to look at what's inside of the building. The next step, the educational specifications, will talk about what should be developed as part of the site, sports fields and so forth, and gardens, and kind of the size and to what standard those should be developed. So that'll be part of the next part. That'll be coming out in the ed specs themselves for high schools. So they're not contained herein because this is just identifying building space.
Okay, because I know that would be helpful, at least with the community members I was with. There were some comments about, are there going to be, is it expected that there will be outside, classrooms, outside covered spaces, gardens, any of that. So I'd love to hear a little bit more as you go, whether we want to try to come up with specific specifications on that or not.
One more piece of, one more piece of feedback. We've heard quite a bit about designing classrooms that have the opportunity to open up to the outside or provide that connection to an outdoor space or potentially a garden. So that will be as part of the ed spec itself, where those opportunities allow design for that. So both to have nature come in, but also to provide access to the outdoor learning potential.
And Director Reagan, I would also add that many of the site considerations will actually be addressed during master planning. And so each of our sites differ somewhat from one another. So when coming up with a standard, if you will, we need to be able to look at each site individually and determine what's possible, what the configurations of the play fields are, exactly how it'll configure. And again, that'll be part of the master planning documents that we'll be bringing forward when we get to that point.
Could you help me understand what 6,000 feet means in terms of career technical education? Is that, I'm just trying to envision, is that an auto shop plus some other spaces? Is it, help me understand what we're talking about. Are there lots of opportunities within 6,000 square feet, or a couple, or does it depend?
Typically, that would be about the size of the shop, whether that would be auto or otherwise. Again, looking at there may be auxiliary uses that go with that, a computer lab or something. So part of it is the CTE space, but what do you put adjacent to it that might be used for core programming as well? So shops typically around 6,000 square feet. If they were all classrooms, that would be about 6 classrooms. So depending on the mix and what the master planning process at each school pulls forward as far as CTE or elective programs.
So as we look at other high schools that have recently been built in the area, is that about what they tend to include in their specifications? Or do you have any idea?
I've done a little research to find that out and have not come up with conclusive numbers, but in talking with Tacoma School District, they've identified they're very similar to us. Their space dedicated to CTE program varies depending on what the program is at each school. So tonight I don't have a area comparison, and can bring that back to you. But I know other school districts have that variation in amount of space devoted to CTE.
to your question, Director Regan, it varies depending on the school and the community within which the school resides and the neighborhood which a school might reside within a school district. They're all very much different. And so high-intensive shop spaces that were usual and customary in the 1960s have given way to much lighter and agile CTE spaces around technology-based programs, CAD design, website design, film, audio-visual communications. So those require smaller spaces. The big traditional wood shops, metal shops, and auto shops require bigger spaces. So depending on the mix in the neighborhood and the interest of the school, one could say that 6,000 square feet could end up with 3 to 5 CTE programs within it, depending on the interest of that place. If the interest is and I don't want to use the word traditional, but the shop space that we are new in the 70s and 80s, 6,000 square feet might be 1 or 2, depending on what the program is.
So I guess one of the questions I would have related to CTE is, as we go through the process, how much flexibility we would have with that 6,000 number. Because if a school chooses to do auto shop, for example, I don't necessarily want them to be precluded to, that's it. And I don't know whether we have the opportunity still to have some flexibility around that, so that we say 6,000 to 9,000 square feet or whatever it might be as we narrow it down. But I guess I'd like us to at least consider that.
I think relative to the use of the enhanced elective space, CTE, SEM space, during master planning, again, what you'll see when we come forward with the plan recommendations are exactly how each of those sites wanted to customize or configure that. And at both Roosevelt and Franklin, for example, there will be differences in terms of how they approach that. What the EdSpec provides us with is kind of a generalized guidance, if you will, something to start with. But
so we're not locked into 6,000.
Right. It's not these aren't hard lock numbers, okay. And of course, what you're hearing tonight is a draft of where we are currently. We have more work to do to further develop this. And this is occurring concurrently with the start of master planning for Roosevelt and Franklin. Mm-hmm. So as we get more information, I think as we come back with it, I think you'll see more of the details on it.
And to that point, I think we're looking at 50-year buildings here, so space that may be used for auto shop in the next 10 years may be used for something else in the 10 years after that. I think some repurpose, similar to what's happening at Ockley Green, repurposing an industrial art space into a dance studio is something that, if that's possible, that's an effective way to stay up with what we need to offer in the classroom. Mm-hmm.
So I'll chime in on that too. I'm particularly concerned about 6,000 square feet for CTE. I'm not sure that is enough. We hear from the community constantly about Benson and everybody putting all their eggs in Benson's basket. We cannot serve all of the students that want to be served with CTE at Benson High School, especially if we're looking at 40-40-20. You're looking at 60% of our kids potentially not going on for a 4-year high school degree. A lot of those students are going to want CTE and they're going to want trades. It's not going to be all computer labs, videos. It's still going to be the kinds of things that are happening at Benson, but you can't service all of those kids at Benson High School. So I'm concerned about the 6,000 square feet too. I'm also concerned about it because if we do something like an auto shop or whatever in that one spot, I'm concerned about what do we do with all the rest of the CTE work that we're going to be doing with students generally as they're going through their high school years. So I think that, again, it's a concern for me, and I don't want to say anything negative about the arts or athletics, because I think they hold kids in school, but so does CTE. And when you look at the space that we're allowing for both the arts and athletics, it's a huge amount of space. Of course, I realize that auditoriums are big, gymnasiums are big, that makes sense. But I think that we also need to think about how much space we put aside for career technical education, given that 60% of our kids may be students who want to use that kind of, or need that kind of educational service. So I just, and you know, I was looking at the memo that we got, and nowhere in this memo does it mention CTE either. So I just want to make sure that we keep it at the front, because again, every week we receive emails from parents about career technical education, and from, not just from parents, from the business community, very concerned about how they can partner with us in developing CTE. So I'm also concerned about how we're reaching out to the community, something that we will do, I know. It's not for EdSpecs to do, but definitely for us to be reaching out to the community to see what the needs are there, so that we're not heading down a track that industry doesn't need. So just my concern.
I guess my question is, in terms of that, how did 6,000 feet come to be?
As Jim said, this is a draft document, and kind of looked at the programs that were being offered out there right now, and what variety of spaces could be served through that. So it was a number we just developed kind of on the average of the spaces, but I certainly hear the concern and questions about is that enough, and that's something we'll go back and re-examine, certainly.
Were there vocational ed teachers included in this survey or in any conversations that you had? I didn't see that in here either, and I know that we're a little short on those these days, as are most school districts, but and I know that it's a difficult thing right now to even get vocational ed teachers out of universities, so something else we need to work on. But just curious about who was included, or if those kinds of people were included in the discussion.
So my recollection is we had elective teachers, certainly not the full gamut of what's offered through CTE. So.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I was curious about the note next to theater in fine and performing arts. It says for 500 script rent bump at greater than 599. Can you explain that to me?
My understanding is that when you buy a script from a company that owns the rights to something, they have tiered rates for what house you're going to play to. So if you're under 500, I don't know if there's also a 250 or something, but if you're under 500, it costs one thing. But if you're going to be able to, if you're going to perform it for 1,000, then they actually increase the amount that you have to pay for the rights to put on that production. And I think that education folks are saying, you know, we probably don't have that kind of money to play to that, so we're okay with a 500. But I don't know if that's.
No, that's a very good description of that, and that's what we've heard from the performing arts teachers that we've talked to, and in negotiating the how much to pay for the script. The question that comes up is, well, how large is your theater? So, in response to that, we can say it's 500 students or spectators for that performance. And if it's a popular performance, it's something that's, you know, you hold 3 or 4 showings of. It also allows for, and this is a lot of comment from John, a better theater, more intimate performance space. Higher quality performances are typically held. So a lot of high schools in the area are going for this smaller version of a theater and getting better quality productions out of it.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Well, I had one other question, and this is about comments that you might have received from teachers about the offices versus classrooms. Having been a classroom teacher for a period of time, I know I always felt very possessive about my classroom. But now being at university, in the university level, you know, I don't have any strong feelings about classroom and have an office. So I'm curious what the feedback from teachers was about that having an office versus having that classroom?
So the conversation started around the potential to do professional development with their colleagues, and many teachers mentioned that it was difficult to do in the classroom, or they needed some conference space. And so we talked about the idea of individual offices or kind of a suite of offices, and that my recollection is that was led by the teachers wanting to have that kind of space available for them. So I think there will be both out there, teachers who...
Both sides, yeah.
Both sides, but
I think it's a great idea, but...
The opportunity to do that and collaborate and have a kind of a private space to do some lesson planning was appealing. I don't know if you had any other thoughts, John?
Yeah.
I think it's not a new idea. There are other high schools, particularly around this area, that have provided that for teachers. And the teachers that were in the room, and also administrators who happen to have been in schools elsewhere around the Upper Willamette Valley and Southwest Washington, where that function had been provided, talked how valuable that had been. And they were talking from their perspective as a teacher, because they had been a teacher in there, and the things that had happened and what was going on.
Yeah.
And so they were supportive of carrying forth that idea.
These are our teachers?
They were your teachers.
These are what our teachers were saying? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Director Buell?
Following up on Pam's really good questions and stuff, comments. The one question that I had about the CTE and the shop stuff is, are we putting in enough hardware, so to speak, electrical things and whatever, those things? Are we putting them in there in that 6,000 foot space so that we don't have to, because what happens is when you, down the line, if somebody says, well, we want to shift to this, we've got this program that we're now and we want to, and you would have to, I don't want to have to come in with the jackhammers and dig up the concrete. Is it already there? Is it in the plan?
So this is where there's going to some overlap between educational specifications, the district construction design guidelines, and then what will be designed at each individual school. So the educational specifications will talk about having enough power, enough data, enough daylight for what's going to happen in each of these spaces, including a shop space. So the program element of that'll be discussed at master planning and taken on into design will provide that for whatever shop or space goes in there, and we'll have some thought about where to locate things in the walls or floors elsewhere for future use. But depending on, we won't know what the future use is, and the design of that space will provide whatever power and data and ventilation will be needed for that space.
So the answer is no.
In the
Is that correct? Yeah.
But that's part of the design.
You're not really designing that 6,000 square feet for making sure that if they want to shift it to a shop, that it's already ready to roll. That there's not a barrier to doing that. For instance, you got to go back out and make changes in order to do it, which stops us. I'm beginning to learn how we work up here, and if we don't have it, it's very hard to get it. If it's already there, then it's easy to shift. If they shift that, so the answer to my question is no. Correct?
A lot of space, these spaces will be designed for what the need is at the master planning process.
But not for the long-range need, thinking in terms of having some space in those schools where you can put a shop easily without having to reconfigure everything. So the answer is no, we don't have that, unless they decide they want it now. Is that correct?
And let me try to add to what Paul said. I think it's important to recognize that whatever space we end up determining needs to be designed, we'll configure that space with all the utilities, all the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, all of the IT configurations that are needed. As part of the master planning, if there's additional spaces that are identified for growth in the future, we would be identifying for future development additional utility support, additional mechanical, electrical, plumbing components. So I don't think it's a no per se. I think it's we're tailoring our planning, our master planning, and then our design to the spaces that we end up choosing as part of our as part of these elective programs. And I don't know if that completely answers.
Just
but
as a longer no.
It's it essentially it takes into account the flexibility that's possible to us. These sites are very restricted in terms of how much space is available there. So that all needs to be developed. And I know I've said this several times tonight, but as the master plans come together, I think there will be more clarity on this. The question of CTE that you're speaking to tonight, I think, is important to go back and look at in a way that when we come back to you, we're more responsive relative to how CTE will be configured.
Director Beal, can I ask for clarification?
You do anything you want.
Ask for clarification on your part. By asking that question, are you giving input to staff to find a way that we can build in additional space? I know some community members might say it's overbuild, but push that in additional spaces, look for ways to do that so that we don't have to go back? Is that, because this is our time to give that feedback. It's
Well, I guess if you're doing feedback from me, because not from anybody beyond me, it would make sense to me that if you are going to move towards CTE possibly, which we might be doing, it kind of get that feeling we may be going that direction. Anytime you can get Pam and I to agree on the same thing, it's a pretty strong direction. And so I just want to make sure that I would like to suggest that option's out there, because what happens is you go into the school, they got the 6,000 square feet, it's a shop, but you're going to have to go in there and spend all this huge amounts of money to do the stuff, and they won't do it. They won't do it. So, but if it's set up to do it, they might do it.
Right.
And I think that's, I mean, to my comment earlier, I think creating space that has a possibility of upgrade, a possibility of flexibility, depending on what era we might be in, and what CTE might be defined over the next 50 years, because again, we're building 50-year plus buildings here, or renovating for the next 50 years. I think having space, I mean, 50 years ago, we wouldn't have been able to sit here and say, what's your Wi-Fi capability? What's your Ethernet capability? There's going to be something that, of course, a big box, a room that has conduits that you can pull wire, a room where you can attach Wi-Fi or what have you, is going to be something that's more flexible in the future versus something that is going to be stuck in the era in which it was built.
So can I just ask a question too? So look, we're also planning to do some upcoming CTE-specific visioning sessions that are really convening people to talk about this particular subject, correct?
Correct.
Could we maybe speak to that a little bit so people understand where they could plug in with some of the ideas that we're hearing? Because I think we've got many members of the community who may also want to participate or have a way of plugging in.
So one of the next phases of the EdSpec project is to work with some business and industry partners that have, some of which you have noted have been vocal with PPS, to talk about current needs and desires for CTE programs. And as part of that, we can identify those programs and then look at those spaces that we have identified here and update as necessary to talk about both design of individual spaces, but to Director Knoll's point, is what's here for 6,000 square feet, is that sufficient for a comprehensive high school? So kind of a bigger district-wide look at that. That'll have some translation into individual spaces, but that's, we're hoping to start convening those meetings next month and have a series of conversations around that point.
This might sound a little goofy, but did the group look at configurations of hallways? And the reason I'm asking is when I was on the design team for the Forest Park Elementary School, we essentially eliminated hallways and kind of developed the classrooms around neighborhoods or pods. And I'm remembering, I believe, John, that you designed the Oregon Trails School. And I'm recalling that the classrooms had an extra, there was sort of glass toward the hall, and then there was an extra area where there was a couple of small tables so that a teacher could essentially send some kids out to do small group work but still be able to supervise them. So I don't know whether has there been any discussion about hallways or hallway spaces or making them more friendly?
So the answer to that is yes.
Good.
And in particular,
That was a short yes.
Yeah. In particular, there was a lot of conversation around that. One of the challenges of high schools are, particularly the ones you have, you're dedicating up to 35% of your the gross area of the building to corridors. And those corridors are used about 5 minutes or 10 minutes every hour if you're lucky, and the rest of the time they sit empty. And that's a lot of space to be dedicating to moving a kid from point A to point B and having no other use for any other time of the day.
Right.
And so what we talked about was, well, what can be done to turn that into usable extension of the classroom for benefit of the teacher that are there, or are there ways to group classrooms in that you can create teaming groups around a commons area, if you will, and by using the corridor to help you do that. So that you're turning corridor into usable space in the time it's not being used for corridor.
Perfect.
To get from point A to point B. And that is part of one of the key characteristics within the program itself that you will see coming forward, that the grouping of classrooms as best as can be accommodated in some of your schools in which they were not designed that way because of the envelope, that you work hard to create groupings of classrooms and turn corridor space into usable educational space, extension of the classroom, or a way to group classrooms together for teaming or collaboration purposes, or to creating departments or interdisciplinary units, however it wants to be done.
Great, thank you.
I just have a couple of comments. One, I really, from what you can get from this document, which is a pretty dry document, I got really excited about the library, about including the large, medium, and small gathering spaces. When we went on our tour up to Seattle as the design advisory groups, people would walk into libraries, and when there were glassed-in rooms that could still be accessible, people just got really, really excited, including the teachers. So I was really excited to see that, and I look forward to starting to see some of the actual plans to make that happen. And then I had a question about designing our lunch areas or our commons for 600. And I'd be curious to hear what my colleagues think. I mean, that's based on keeping an open campus and cycling at our current, a little bit higher capture rate than we currently do. Because I guess, and maybe this is just a traditional person in me, what I grew up with is what I kind of expect. But we don't keep our kids on campus, and I'd be curious to hear what other colleagues think, if that's a direction we want to head. If it is, then our common area needs to be, I don't know, bigger, or at least we're having 3 or 4 lunches, which I think would be a scheduling difficulty. Other colleagues' thoughts?
So I grew up in an open campus.
Okay, see?
And, yeah, so you must not have.
I didn't. People could keep an eye on me.
Right, and, you know, I think that sometimes I'm a little concerned about them with our really young students, our freshmen. It makes me a little nervous about open campus sometimes. But generally, I don't have any issue with it. And the other part that I heard somebody talking about at one time was something closer to like carts.
Food.
I'm not a food cart aficionado, but having places throughout the building where students could get food is an interesting concept to me, especially since, at least when I've been in the high schools at lunchtime, you see a lot of kids go through the cafeteria line and then they're out in the hall, or they're outside, or they're not sitting down in the cafeteria anyway. So I mean, those are just my thoughts about it.
But is that because there's not enough space and they're not inviting places that open up to like, could we design
Well,
it in a way
think about the cafeterias. I mean, the ones that I've seen, there are some that are in the basement
Right,
or,
so,
you
so
know,
now we're
small,
creating new
nasty little
ones,
bit.
so do we want to
Right,
turn that corner?
Right. Well, I think if you're going to use them not only for that lunchtime, but also as a student gathering place, that's a really important thing to think about, because it would be wonderful to have them up front in our buildings if they really are going to be student gathering places, like a True Commons or an Agora, or something really like in the. I'm currently involved in the design. I'm not designing it, of course, of our new business building down at Oregon State, and the main floor is a small restaurant, and then it's all space for students to gather at tables and couches, and then down the sides are, as you guys were talking about, open rooms, small project rooms for maybe 5 or 6 students to be behind glass doors and do projects, which is what I see a lot of our high schools. The project work and the collaboration that's being done in classes seems to be somewhere we're heading in the high school as well, so. Just
Closed campus all the way, Greg, I'm with you.
You can tell who has young kids.
No, I think one of the really interesting things to me from past presentations and my participation in some has been the idea of sort of just changing the perspective a little bit and creating community space or open space within a school versus having a community space with a school surrounding it. And it's this, I think it's an idea of how welcoming is this space and how are you bringing your community within it, even during those school hours. The idea, as Pam suggested, having, pods with, food court areas or whatever you want to call them, custodial nightmares, I think is a really interesting one. But I think it also lends to a space that is also attractive to students to socialize in. I mean, that's one of the things that we were just saying, and you mentioned, a lot of our high schools, they're not very appealing spaces, the cafeterias, but there are more appealing spaces, and they're spaces that actually are centrally located, and you see movement, and you have an opportunity to socialize and be around folks that maybe you wouldn't see throughout the rest of the day. So I think it's an interesting problem, and one hopefully we'll be able to get our hands around.
It's another use for those hallways.
Other thoughts about that? And Director Regan, I know you didn't mean it this way, but this is actually reflected on feedback that I've heard about students at Cleveland in particular who make their way to a local fast food restaurant, and I get to hear stories, and perhaps they're anecdotal, perhaps they're not, about students not coming back, and teachers who has the time to go find them and make sure they're back. And so, yes, I have young children. I actually would feel very comfortable with my 10-year-old going out just fine, maybe more than what I anticipate for my teenager, but I can't say that quite yet. The other comment, I guess, or 2 comments I wanted to make is, one, I appreciate Director Morton. I think Director Buell, you were both saying that, and trying to anticipate what might be needed in 50 years or 100 years. Nobody would have even 50 years ago thought that health occupations would need the kind of space, and nobody would have ever dreamt what kind of machines that would need to be there, what kind of facilities. So how challenging that is to not overbuild for today when we know that the change is happening so quickly, but still to adequately prepare, because you're right, Director Buell, it becomes a barrier when we try to go in and make any kind of change later because it becomes cost prohibitive. And I guess the last feedback I want to put is that I noticed an inclusion of gendered bathrooms or unisex bathrooms or gender neutral bathrooms, and I'd be interested. I think that we're going to see much more of this. And so I wonder if we don't have to change a little bit in our scope and how we work to accommodate that, rather than 1 set of bathrooms or 2 set of bathrooms. How would we accommodate that? And I also think that we should look at changing facilities. We have a boys and a girls locker room, and I think that's over the next 100 years or 50 years, that's going to become more of an issue that I would like to be on the front end of. And So, other comments, thoughts? Great. Thank you all very much. We are going to move on. Yes. As noted in our revised agenda that we sent out earlier today, we changed this topic to an information-only item this evening. The board will not hold a vote on this topic until October 1st. We'll have a short noon meeting to discuss this to give opportunity for feedback. Tonight, the board will discuss the designation of the building area for Franklin, Grant, and Roosevelt High School modernization work efforts. Superintendent Smith, would you like to do this item? And I know that we have one gentleman that signed up for public comment, so maybe before we move on to that, we invite citizen testimony. Because it was an action item, we were going to have testimony, or do we normally introduce it and then have citizen testimony? Remind me, I'm blanking.
Meaning do the presentation first and then ask for the testimony? Is that what you're
Yeah,
thinking?
should we
Or
do,
the-
does that make the most sense? I'm blanking
Yeah,
on what we
so
usually do.
presentation
Okay.
first and then testimony.
Presentation first
Okay.
and then that.
Okay.
Thank you.
So to do the presentation, I will introduce C.J. Sylvester, who is our
Thank
Chief
you.
Operating Officer, and again, Jim Owens, who is the Executive Director of the Office of School Modernization.
Thank you, Superintendent Smith. Staff is recommending adjustments to the capacities of the 3 high schools that are being fully modernized as part of the 2012 School Improvement Bond. These high schools are Franklin, Grant, and Roosevelt. The first thing I want to be clear about is that this recommendation does not impact the district's high school system, which remains at 7 comprehensive and 2 focus option high schools. And it does not impact other bond projects, which remain wholly intact, as does the $482 million bond program in its entirety. Making a final determination about the size of these high schools at this time in the process allows for the Franklin and Roosevelt projects to remain on schedule. There are a number of circumstances that serve as background for this staff recommendation. We have completed the draft comprehensive high school area program, as you have just heard. We are benefiting from high school enrollment stability as a result of the implementation of the 2010 high school system design process. We have updated enrollment forecasts and anticipated improvements in capture rates for these newly rebuilt facilities that speak to the need for larger capacities. Metro and the city project significant longer-term demographic changes in the Portland metro area. And the recommendation further acknowledges that common areas cannot be expanded once constructed. So staff is proposing capacity changes that take Franklin from a 1,500 common area and 1,500 classroom capacity in terms of the number of students to a number of students of 2,000 in the common area and 1,750 in the classroom. With Grant, we are recommending that we move again from 1,500 common area, 1,500 classroom capacity to a capacity of 2,000 students in the common area and 1,750 in the classrooms. We are recommending that Roosevelt remain as was initially proposed, with a common area of 1,500 students and a classroom build-out of 1,200 students. The impact of larger buildings has a related impact on project costs. The bond program reserve was established in order to accommodate project scope changes, such as staff is recommending, without impacting other bond projects, scopes, and budgets. Staff has proposed for the full modernization of Franklin, Grant, and Roosevelt High Schools that the budget be revised from $247 million to $257 million. The $10 million increase would be funded from the bond reserve. Each project would retain its 15% contingency, and the cost per square foot for all 3 projects would be reduced from $220 a square foot to $200 per square foot. We're happy to answer any questions you may have about any part of this recommendation. And I would also like to acknowledge that Kevin Spellman, who's the chair of the Bond Accountability Committee, is in the audience this evening. Would you like us to vacate for public comment?
Yes, that'd be great. Thank you. Yes, correct. Ms. Houston, can you call our citizen comment?
That would be
Scott Bailey.
Great. Mr. Bailey, I'm going to forego the directions that I read earlier this evening about public comment input, but you'll also have the 3 minutes with the 2 minutes at the green light, 1 minute at yellow light, and red light buzzer means please stop. Thank you and welcome.
You know I don't pay attention to those anyway.
If we get to the red, I'll help you remember.
Thanks and good evening. Our Portland Our Schools was briefed on this Friday morning, and we have a number of comments and concerns, which I understand have been floating around the district, so what the heck. First thing is, if my memory serves, and I apologize if I'm a little fuzzy on this, but I believe we brought this issue up a year ago. I know that during the long-range facilities plan, I asked Portland State about long-term forecasts, longer than the 10-term, and they said 60,000 was a reasonable number for the district. And if you divide that out, that's over 2,000 students in 9 high schools as an average. So conceptually, we would support looking at increased numbers, but we'd also ask why 2,000? Is that enough? Considering that the city of Portland is projecting a 50% increase in population over the next 40 or 50 years, that would push it well beyond 60,000. Second thing, why not Roosevelt to 2,000, given the growth coming up? We know if we're planning for more growth, imagine along Lombard, a whole bunch of new apartment complexes like are going in right now along Division, along MLK, and so on. Why not 2,000? At least have a conversation with the Roosevelt community before going forward and saying 1,500 here, 2,000 there. And I'm speaking for core spaces, not for the classroom build-out. And I would say Director Reagan raised some interesting questions about the classroom build-out that should be looked at. We worry about the loss of quality going down to that $200 per square foot. We have no idea what that means. We understand that's a conceptual number, but the BAC has said that's an issue. Finally, we worry about the increased risk. We just had a conversation about CTE and flexibility, and maybe we should build to more capacity just in case. That's a cost. This proposal would do away with half of the reserves before we've even dug into these 3 high schools and had the, oh my God, this is going to cost more than we thought because of what we found when we started tearing them down. Finally, I want to say some comments about CTE. The process seems to be ground up individual school at a time. That's not the way we should be planning CTE. Can I finish my thoughts about CTE?
30 seconds or less.
Okay. Over in Clark County today, I was at a planning meeting. We're looking at combining CTE planning for the large school districts up there. We need to have a comprehensive view that then has the individual school communities fitting into that comprehensive view. And yet we're launching a couple of high schools right now. We need to have that plan now. And you know, we've had so many blue ribbon committees over the years, and we still don't have a plan. That doesn't speak well about the leadership in this district.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey.
And I'll stop there.
Thanks. Now, CJ and Jim, if you could come back up as we talk about the recommendation. Questions, thoughts, comments?
I'd be happy to start. I'm glad we're having this discussion now. Clearly, it's the time to have it, if not even sooner. I'm generally open to and wanting us to build to a larger core for the facility, and so people understand that what we're talking about is, actually, why don't you go ahead and explain what core means so people can follow along?
Okay, we're using the words core and common area interchangeably, and what that means are the areas that all of the students and teachers use. So it's cafeterias, it's theaters, it's gymnasiums, it's the commons or the agora, to the extent that that's above and beyond the cafeteria square footage. It's restrooms. It's the kind of central core facilities.
Administrative spaces.
Administrative spaces, yes.
Or at least front office.
Yep.
Hallways, corridors, to the extent that they're not being used, right? I know they just said they were designing them out, but.
So I'm generally open to a larger core. I'm not decided on whether Roosevelt's core should be built out as far as the other two, just based on the population that we're seeing at this point. Clearly, Roosevelt and Franklin have a much lower capture rate in terms of students than the others. So I'm open to the discussion. I haven't kind of figured that piece out. What I'm more concerned about as I'm looking at this is how much classroom capacity would be built out initially. Because when you look at Franklin, Grant, and Roosevelt and the number of students that are projected to be in those buildings, projected enrollment for 2017 and 18, there's a huge variance. And so my concern is that Grant High School, if we build it out to 1,750 students now, is going to be too small. It only gives us fudge room of about 60 students, or probably 2 classrooms. On the other hand, you're looking at Roosevelt, which would, under your scenario, be built out to accommodate an additional, 10 or 11 classrooms. And so I'm trying to understand how some of that makes sense, and certainly part of it, again, is that Grant has a capture rate of 80% versus, 63 or 53 for Franklin and Roosevelt. But what I don't want is for us to be completed, complete a building and then have a whole wing that's not used either. So there's a balance there.
I agree. I can tell you we are a little bit at the demographic information that we have is what leads us in certain directions. And so for the 2025-26 school year, Franklin High School is being shown at 1,643, Grant High School is being shown at 1,622, and Roosevelt's being shown at over 1,000. Grant
at what?
Over 1,000.
So over 1,000. Okay.
And so Grant, based on a surge that we have, goes up to 1,723 in 2020-21, and then goes back down to 1,622. So there's a bubble working its way through the system in the Grant cluster currently that's going to be reflecting in those years. So that's the best information we have, today, looking out to 2025-26, which is as far as the PSU demographic projections take us.
Are those assuming the same capture rates?
Those do assume the same capture rates. And so as we indicated in the staff report, with Roosevelt at a 53% capture rate and Franklin at a 63% capture rate, we would assume, based on what's happened in other school districts that are comparable, that those capture rates are going to increase when we have new facilities available in those areas. With Grant already at 80%, we would expect that the increase in capture rate would be something less than what we would see in the other two areas where it's so low.
CJ, can I follow up on that? This might be a question for enrollment and transfer, but I don't know all the schools, the feeder schools to Grant right now, but I just think about our discussions in the past couple of years that Beverly Cleary is bursting at the seams, right? We're doing everything we can. Alameda, bursting at the seams. So 2025-26, that brings the current kindergartners, right, up to high school. There seems to be, without looking at all those numbers, there seems to be a surge, so I'm not sure how it comes down. We have bigger numbers in the middle grades? Is that what we're saying, the 3, 4, 5, 5th graders are bigger numbers than the kindergarten?
It's actually Grant that has a surge between 2020 and 20, 23. So there's a 3-year period in there where it goes up over 1,700, and then it goes back down into the 1,600s.
I'm trying to mesh the data, knowing that demographers, right? I mean, it's funny, sometimes people say, oh, look, PSU says you're really growing at this, and other people are like, why do you use that PSU number? Like, so it plays both ways, but I'm just trying to jive it with my understanding of what I hear at those schools today. And I feel like there are more kindergartens in that cluster now than there were 3 years ago. So
That may be true, but I don't have the kindergarten data in front
right,
of
that's
me.
what I'm saying. It might
Yep.
be an enrollment transfer, but it'd help me to know as part of this discussion.
And I guess my bigger question is that if we're looking all the way out to 2026 at Roosevelt, and you're only looking at 1,000+ kids as the projection, I'm a little concerned about building it out quite as much at this time. That's not to say that we don't have the capacity to do it at a later date, but I'm not understanding why we would build that school out to an extra 200 kids when you're building Grant out to an extra 60 kids, or Franklin for that matter.
I think the difference is the capture rate. With Roosevelt currently at 53%, even a 10% increase in terms of the capture rate would take us up to 1,100 students. And if it's more than that, of course, it will be even more. So I do believe that that's the significant difference between Roosevelt and Grant, for instance.
Well, I think I'm no demographer, but anecdotally, where I see the population growth booming is in northeast Portland. It's in southeast, it's farther southeast, not inner southeast. Those are also the communities that have a higher birth rate in comparison to those families living primarily in sort of inner northeast or southwest. Those are the families that are having 3-4 children. And I think that's something that we have to take into consideration too. And I think one of the trends that I'm really interested in hearing from the Portland State demographers is as our community and our students become more diverse, what does that do, if anything, to the capture rate within those clusters? That's something that I asked, I think, 2 years ago, and they said we don't track that, and maybe they do now. But I think it's something so we can use that. We could use that sort of disaggregated data on as just another variable, and to figure out, does 1,500 make sense in a school like Roosevelt that is one of the most diverse schools in the most diverse neighborhoods in the city for our future projection.
And clearly, the board understands that staff will be happy to design and construct whatever it is you want us to design and construct. So I want to make sure that you're familiar with that.
And we understand that it comes with dollars, too.
Oh, yes, of course.
Anything is possible.
So I have a question, because there's the board and then there's the voters.
Yes.
And so we just voted on this bond, and we put something in front of them. What exactly has changed information-wise from 2012 when we put this out?
Well, I'd say there's several things. I mean, one is the fact that high school system design has had a stabilizing effect on our enrollment. Every year we get updated enrollment information from, not enrollment, but demographic information from PSU, and it does change. The City of Portland just released in May of this year, of 2013, their growth projections for their long-range planning, which is something that Mr. Bailey, who was speaking briefly, referred to as the fact that they're anticipating another 280,000 people here inside the city limits of Portland by the year 2035. And so where those people are actually going to reside, whether they'll be in our district or in some of the other Portland districts, and the demographics of those that in-migration, we don't know. So how many of those will be families, how many will have school-aged children, whether they're going to land in the west side, inner east side, outer east side, north, northeast, is speculative at best. But we do know that Portland's going to be growing. So, and that's been part of the comprehensive plan work that the City of Portland's been working on for a number of years, and that report was just published in May of 2013.
Okay, and then in terms of delivering what we said we would deliver, and going down from $220 to $200 per square foot, and maybe we should have the back member come and talk to us about this, but could you talk to us a little bit about that? Are we going to be able to deliver at 200 square feet, $200
Yes.
per square foot at what?
We will design and build to budget. It means that there will be a whole series of decisions that get made as we go through the process that have an impact on the final cost of the project. And so it's too early to know, because of course have just started input sessions on the master planning about whether some of that's going to come in structure, depending on, do we go with steel, do we go with concrete, what are the relative prices and the costs and the benefits. I mean, so there's a whole series of decisions that get made through the entire design and construction process that need to bring us in on budget. And so it's not possible for us to tell you right now what those decisions are going to be and what the difference is in terms of that $20 a square foot.
I would also add that in looking at our conceptual estimates when the bond program was being developed, that we used a third-party estimator, Ryder Level Bucknet, who's a nationally prominent estimating firm that looks at different categories of construction. And as they looked across the K-12 arena, they target high schools and elementary schools across the nation, and they have specific data for Portland. And the Portland data at the time showed a range of between $190 per square feet up to $250. So parametrically or conceptually, we selected the mid-range. Going to 200, we are still within that range. And so as we have the opportunity to master plan and then start our design process, this is a time now where we can flex to that. And as CJ mentioned, really manage to the budget that would go with these projects.
Okay, thank you.
The first couple of questions are ones that I was given by someone else, one of my constituents, and asked me to ask, and I thought, and I went through them, not one of them out, but there's a couple of them here. The PSU thing was June 2012, right? The one we've looked at? So we've known the PSU stats since June 2012. And then we added in what else that made the change here to all of a sudden it comes up now? Because that's quite a bit. That's, what, 14 months? That was the length of my second marriage. So what else came into play there? What else caused us, there must be something else to cause it, to bring it now, like last Friday or something when we got it? What was it? What else came into play?
Well, we were just talking about the May 2013 City of Portland Growth Projection Report.
That was the one that changed everything?
No, I would say it was a combination of things, actually. That was part of it. The stabilizing influence of high school system design in terms of what we've been able to accomplish with that in terms of our enrollment. Us being able to anticipate, based on discussions with Seattle public schools and other urban school districts who have gone through this same kind of work in terms of increases in the capture rates. So and also the education specification, as you heard just this evening, has recently been, the draft for the comprehensive high school has recently been completed. We had originally estimated that, and this was for bond purposes, that we would need about 160 square feet per student. And in fact, the high school ed spec is coming in at more like 166 square feet per student. So even based on retaining the same capacity, the schools are going to be larger, or would be projected to be larger based on the ed spec than what was in the bond. Okay. So what I would say is there's a whole,
Several.
there are a series of issues that have been refined over the last 12 months. And so we have more and better information now as a result of work that's been done over the last 12 months since the bond was approved in November. Actually, I guess it hasn't even been 12 months yet, 10 months.
This next one's a little longer, but just basically what it asks is that why Roosevelt's not increasing in our population projections. The population projections, what Matt said, he said, and I think there's probably a lot of truth in it, that's where you've got housing opportunities out there. You've got all this stuff in North Portland going on, housing opportunities, increased growth. They've had, let me see, since the curriculum expanded and stabilized in the last 2 years, a dramatic increase in enrollment has brought the current actual enrollment in Roosevelt to approximately what was projected for 2026.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're saying that's going to slow down some way, we think, or?
No, actually, I mean, what we're identifying as our recommendation is that we have a core capacity for 1,500 students, and with this bond, we build out for classroom capacity for 1,200 students. To accommodate growth.
So you're saying
Yes.
that's supposed to accommodate these other increases?
That's-
Supposedly?
Well, that's supposed to accommodate the increases that we have as good a knowledge as we can today in 2013.
I read a book called The Signal and the Noise by Nate Silver. Talks about the incredible difficulty of predicting those things out. And one of the things he says when people get in trouble when they do predictions is by doing it by the numbers as opposed to taking all these other things into account. And so just, I guess, adding that on. All right, let's try again, just a couple more. What's the actual deadline for making the decision?
Well,
You say that would not disrupt the construction schedules.
In a perfect world, we'd be making the decision tonight.
Right.
But in fact, I understand that's not going to happen. So we have identified and put out to the public, to about 5,000 people, emails and flyers and other materials that indicate that we're going to come back to the Franklin and Roosevelt communities on October 12th for one of them and October 19th for the second one, with options for their consideration for master planning. If we believe that the decision will be put off longer than next week, which I understand is what's currently being contemplated, then we would need to change those dates. And that would have a ripple effect through the balance of design and construction.
Last question from the constituent, then I have one of my own. What's the chance of putting together the Long-Range Facilities Planning Committee to consider these changes and fully vet the implications? A couple of these had been asked previously by Mr. Bailey. So.
Well, I guess there would be two parts to that answer, actually. The Long-Range Facilities Planning Committee had a charge based on Oregon Revised Statute 190 that had a 10-year time frame. So the Long-Range Facilities Planning Committee is not the group that put together the bond materials because they've got a 10-year planning horizon, and one thing we indicate in the staff report is that we have to look beyond a 10-year planning horizon in terms of the schools that we're looking to design and construct. There was actually a separate committee, a bond development committee, that worked with the public and the school board regarding a variety of options for the ballot measure consideration. So the Long-Range Facilities Planning Committee
isn't the one you'd want to do, is what you're saying.
Well, I don't know that. It's just a funny mix of characterizations, is how I would put it, in terms of the fact that we had multiple committees involved with different pieces of this, and it was a very linear process at the time. And so to go back to one, you would think that we would want to go back to multiple. And this is really, you know, a policy level decision for the board.
Here's my question. And this is, you can tell that mine's a dumber one. I'm having trouble with the size of the buildings. Grant used to have 3,000 kids in it. Now we're rebuilding it, and it's got 2,000. What happened? Did part of it burn down and I missed it or something? I mean, what happened there?
No,
I
actually.
mean, it wasn't I know 3,000 was squeezed in there, but it had 3,000 kids in it, and now we're going to drop it to 2,000 when we build it.
Well, and I would suggest that educational delivery has changed a lot over the last, 3, 4, or 5 decades. We
Still
now
a lot of
have
shops, though.
Yeah, we now have requirements regarding the provision of services around special education, around English as a second language, and a variety of other kinds of interventions and pedagogy. So the kinds of schools that you and I went to are different, even though they look exactly the same right now, because these are the schools that the school district currently has, and they're old enough to have represented the era in which we graduated from high school.
Probably look a lot like the ones 3 years ago when I was teaching school, though, in the brand-new building up in Vancouver.
I don't know about that, but I can say that that teaching and learning have evolved significantly since the time, that we were in high school, and our buildings need to reflect that. We are looking at expanding Grant, which actually is probably contrary to what you're thinking in terms of the fact that there used to be 3,000 students there, but we're looking at taking both Franklin and Grant up to just over 300,000 square feet each in order to accommodate the Common Core of 2,000 students, and then, of course, the classrooms for 1,750.
And the last part of that number question is, right now Roosevelt's bigger than Franklin.
In
Correct?
terms of existing square feet?
Square feet, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, how does that come into play with what we've done in the bond planning? I mean, we've got more kids in, because we're saying, okay, we're going to put more kids in Franklin than Roosevelt, but right now Roosevelt's bigger and Franklin's smaller.
Well, we're looking at
What
taking
happened?
Franklin, based on the proposal, based on the education specifications, Franklin would go from its existing 218,000 square feet, and if we kept it at 1,500 core and 1,500 classroom capacity, it would go up to about 250,000 square foot. With the recommendation in front of you this evening, with a 2,000 core and 1,750 classrooms, it goes up to just over 300,000 square feet. So Franklin will get significantly bigger under either building to the education specification at 1,500 or if we increase the capacity as recommended.
Thank you.
So, just really quickly, first of all, I want to thank both of you for the extensive staff report that you provided to us. The materials are superb, so thank you very much. I could tell a lot of work went into these. And then I guess I just have a comment, it's not really a question, and it's something that I think you reminded me of, and we've had other people remind us of, and that is that we have other levers available to us, and I'm thinking particularly on Grant and maybe Franklin eventually, that we have as a board adopted, and those levers include boundary changes. And we also have a school, an empty high school, Marshall, in, that is available to us at some time as well. So as we're looking at these numbers, I think that as a board, given the fact that we have said that we are going to look at that as one of our major levers, that we need to remember and keep that in consideration while we're looking at the rest of this. So.
And I would say that the long-range facilities plan indicates that very thing, that enrollment boundaries should be considered as the first option rather than the last one, and that capital options should be secondary to them whenever possible. And then also the idea that, yes, we're talking about 3 high schools right now, but if we move forward as had been proposed in 2012 when this ballot measure moved forward, and we follow this with another 3 high schools, followed by another 3 high schools, we have a series of tiers that we're going through, and we'll have the opportunity as we go through this to make adjustments with each group of high schools that we're talking about, so that as better and more information gets developed, whether it's as a result of long-range planning by Metro and the city that's coming to fruition or anything else, changes can be made in the tier of high schools that's currently under consideration to help adapt to that better information.
Thank you. But not before you go, but before we move on, I know that both Kevin Spellman and Louis Fontenot are here from our Bond Advisability Committee, Bond Advisory Committee. And I don't want to put you both on the spot, but I know that you sent us a document that we just received recently. Could one or both of you be willing to come up and share with us your perspective? Somebody referenced a concern you had in one of these documents, and provide your perspective on these changes or recommendations. I thought if you're going to sit here until this late at night doing volunteer work, we could at least hear from you.
I have several more questions, Greg, when we're done.
Okay, great. Pardon.
Members of the board, Superintendent Smith. I'm Kevin Spellman, Chair of the Bond Accountability Committee, and with me is Louis Fontenot, one of our members. We did send you a document. We were briefed on this issue last week, and the committee has reached a general consensus. And essentially, we certainly don't take a position as to whether you should adopt this resolution or not. That's not our business. What we tried to look at was what would be the effect if you did adopt the resolution. And we found that, to the best of our knowledge, this could be done within the scope of the existing bond program. And CJ and Jim have both done a good job, I think, of explaining that. I'd like to kind of commend them in their approach to the degree that it's very transparent what they're proposing. It's simply taking $10 million from the bond reserve and reducing the cost per square foot of these high schools. Doesn't touch other contingencies, it doesn't touch escalation, it doesn't touch soft costs, it doesn't touch the other work. And really there are a lot of moving parts in this bond program, and the temptation certainly is there to move money around. There's no question that this proposal would increase the risk simply because the cost per square foot has been reduced to the lower end of the range, and that's a risk issue, and takes 10 of the $20 million bond reserve, which is a risk mitigation fund, if you like. The other concern that came up really is not driven by this proposal because it existed already. As we looked again at the escalation contingency, we have concerns about that, and this proposal doesn't change that. So we wanted to put that back out front and center, I guess. Schedule is a concern. As CJ said, we're really looking for direction one way or the other so we can move forward with this. I know you all have concerns about schedule, and so as does the public. And this is kind of a day-to-day thing now. We delay these decisions. It has the propensity, at least, to delay the entire program. Louis, do you want to add anything to that? And certainly open to questions.
You covered pretty much everything there. The number one thing in my mind, or close to the top of the list, is this is coming out of the board's reserve. And it's half the board's, or a good portion of the board's reserve. So now's the time that you make the decision. If you spend the money, then when, 4 months down the line, when you're halfway through a design and you go, oh, we really need this, X, the money's already been allocated. And so that opportunity will not be there as robustly. You won't be able to, put $20 million towards it because half the money has been reserved now. So that's my concern. But then again, you're in schematic design now. this is when you make those decisions.
Two quick pieces to add, I think, that are relevant. One is that what we've seen so far from the project management of this bond program has been really good. And, the summer work is really a small part of this program, but it's not a trivial exercise to achieve what's been achieved. So that gives us confidence in the ability of this team. The other is, when you increase risk and you reduce contingencies, it can have the effect of imposing discipline on everybody, and that would respectfully include all of you. It would be very clear that we no longer have any kind of fluff here, if there ever was any. Everyone would understand these targets are at the lower end of the range, and it does limit the flexibility. That's a plus and a negative, of course. So,
thanks. I know, Director Regan, you had some additional questions, but while we have, if you're open to questions, if folks
Sure.
have a particular question for these two.
I do. In terms of the escalation reserves that you're concerned about, what sort of mitigation can one have with that concern, or you just sit there and sweat?
Well, to a degree, you sit there and sweat. The good news is that these high schools are front-loaded in the sense that we should have, if we can stay on schedule, we should have guaranteed maximum prices on Roosevelt and Franklin within a year from now. So it's not like we got to guess what construction costs will be 5 years from now for most of this contingency. Grant is a little further out. The other mitigations are dealt with through the design process, where, for instance, if one kind of product, its inflation goes higher than others, that can influence product choices. Steel, concrete, all the way through the process. Louis, you deal with this all the time, so.
Yes, the design risk that I see, or the construction risk, is going to be inflationary. We are coming out of the Great Recession, whether people say we are not, but we're coming out of it. And so we've not, in my day-to-day business, we've not seen inflation pressures yet in construction, but we know that they're coming. We're talking with contractors every day that everyone's, we're nervous. But we still have to plan for the future. We have to build for the future, and that's what we're doing here. So with those risks, you hope that your assumptions are the best, that you use the best and most accurate models possible, and then you put on your pants and you and you get to work. And I think that's what we're doing here.
Okay, thank you.
So one of the things you talked about, I think, would also be called opportunity cost. If you go from $220 a square foot to $200 a square foot, at this point, we're precluding spending money for other things. So two of the issues that I've talked about as wanting to include in these rebuilds are things like the opportunity for solar on the roofs, so that we can hopefully lower our operating costs over time, or to ensure that we have air conditioning in these buildings, so that they truly would be year-round community use buildings. I still don't have a clear understanding of whether either of those options are available, and I would specifically want to know whether we would preclude those options by doing this. And I'm not sure that you would answer that as opposed to them, but.
Well,
I just don't want to come back and have this conversation and say, oh, because we increase the size of the building, we can't do solar, Bobby, sorry. Or we're not going to do air conditioning, Bobby. So I
I believe that those are still on the table now because the buildings are yet to be fully designed.
that, when you,
When I get back up there, if you'd like me to answer that.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure who's the most appropriate people to answer it, so.
Jim and I.
Okay, so that sounds great.
Thank you both, and
Thank
both
you very
for being
much.
here. Thanks for all your work on overseeing this and making sure everything is moving forward.
Okay, so we know what our first question is. So the change in the cost per square foot does not change the scope of the project in terms of the fact that we still know that these facilities need to be 12-month facilities. And we still have a 1.5% required by state law that we need to put into either solar or other very limited green kinds of construction work. And the conversation we're having now is if we're capable of bringing in a partner with us on the solar, then maybe we can use that 1.5% in terms of some of the super passive elements of the building that help us further with the 12-month. But if not, it will be used for solar. So we're looking at solar either way, under either circumstance at all three high schools and Fabian.
And the possibility for air conditioning also.
Yes.
Okay.
That's, when I say a 12-month school, that's what we're talking about.
Okay.
A facility that's capable of being
So can we
used.
make sure that is in the minutes? Thank you.
I- but what I'm not saying necessarily is that it's air conditioning. I'm calling it a 12-month school because if we're able to go super passive and we're able to accommodate an appropriate temperature range over a 12-month period by doing it through other design features, and we could actually eliminate the need for air conditioning, I still want that to be on the table. So.
This is also a very linear process that involves many steps that will help us further refine the scope, the quality, and the budgets. And I think as we go through master planning, as we get into schematics, we come back to you with our schematic design package, you'll have a lot more clarity in terms of what we're proposing to accomplish, which will then align with our builder as we bring them on under the CMGC methodology that you had approved last month. We'll have a really good sense of a guaranteed maximum price, if you will, a GMP, and that'll give us a much stronger sense of confidence as we move into construction phase on these schools. A lot more cost control, knowing where we're going to land when we complete these schools.
Director Buell?
Are the windows going to open if we have air conditioning?
It depends. That's a nice legal answer.
What is it? It depends on where are we now? Are we thinking, I spent my life practically in buildings where the air conditioning broke and the windows didn't open. And we have a very good example of the problems of that in Adams High School, which we demolished because it had mold every place, because it didn't end out. I, by the way, am the only person probably in the city of Portland who knows where that mold came from, but I'm not telling.
He's holding that secret.
Super secret.
Okay. I need help remembering what the question was, sorry. I got so sidetracked.
I think the question was about
operable windows, sorry about that. I got lost somewhere in there. In all likelihood, there will be some operable windows. It depends. There's a series of decisions that need to be made, particularly around our three high schools that have historic facades, about whether we're going to be rehabbing the existing windows and doing some kind of interior storm windows that also have an operable component, or whether we're going to be replacing those windows. And then there's the question on operable windows about whether they're operable at the whim of whoever's in the room, or whether they're operable under certain circumstances, depending on the interior temperature. So all of that's part of the conversation that takes place during design. I think I can say that architecture in general has gone away from the closed building that became fairly popular, particularly in the 70s and even through the 80s, where the thought was that everything should be fully closed and you would have just an artificial ventilation system, and that things have come a long way since then. And that indoor environmental quality, indoor air quality, access to natural ventilation is part of also the LEED certification system that will be part of what we'll be doing as we go through the design process.
Thank you.
So A couple more questions. What will we notice as a difference between 220 square foot building cost per square foot versus a $200 cost per square foot? Obviously, we had 220 in there for a reason, so what kinds of materials would change?
That's where we don't have an answer until we get into the design process. I think I indicated before, I mean, you start having those conversations at the really rudimentary level, or I shouldn't say rudimentary, sorry to all the structural engineers who are listening. In terms of deciding what structural method are we going to go with concrete? Are we going to go with steel? Are we going to go with a mix? What are the various cost return on investments in terms of that? That's going to feed through every single decision we make throughout the entire design process in order to get to that $200 a square foot. So it's not as simple, because we're at the front end of the process. If we were deep into the process and the only thing we could impact, for instance, were finishes, then you could say, gee, instead of this finish, you're getting this finish. But because we're at the very start of the process when we're doing this, it's an integrated design process, and so every single decision will be valued against its durability, its operability and maintainability, and us giving the greatest value to the voters based on what the bond had proposed.
Okay.
I think it's also fair to say that the science that went into the $220 per square foot was a conceptual or parametric estimate, taking data for regional Portland Metro for high schools. And so we didn't have a precise scope that was established with that. Instead, we had a range, and we selected right in the middle. We selected right between the two numbers. And so as we get started, we're at a lower end, certainly, but as CJ mentioned, it really becomes the discipline of how we look at the scope and how we manage what we're actually going to accomplish. And then as we develop our plan, I don't think it'll be very evident, actually, the difference between 220 and 220 and 200, because we'll approach it from the beginning using a 200 number. Also, I think it's worth emphasizing that we're inflating these numbers based on when construction starts. We actually have a methodology that allocates escalation dollars to the midpoint of construction phase. So we're actually taking the time to look at escalation over that period, what it amounts to, and as we complete our schematic design, we'll be allocating that. So we'll have a much better sense of that, and the actual dollar per square foot will go up at that point, because escalation will have that influence on it.
So, yeah, the $220 and $200 is a comparison of second quarter 2012 dollars. So it is an even comparison, and so escalation will simply take that $200 and inflate it up based on the construction index.
So the one thing I also wanted to ask my colleagues was the question that came up about the core building space and whether we should be building all three of these to the same core 2,000 versus two of them to 2,000 and then Roosevelt at 1,500. And I don't know if anybody has a strong opinion about that, and I don't know whether or not you, CJ, could tell us what the difference in cost would be. Is that going to be a huge difference in cost? I don't know what
it is.
Well,
I don't know what's huge. There's a difference in cost. It's about $3.1 million.
What's 3.1?
If we took Roosevelt from a core of 1,500 and a classroom of 1,200 to a core of 2,000 and classroom of 1,200, it's 3.1 million.
Okay, that's helpful to know. And what,
and so
again,
that would be
what
in
would the
addition
difference
to the
be?
10
What would
million
you-
we're already talking about.
What would you see, what would you feel, what would be different? Would it be a different sized gym? Would it be, I mean, do you have any sense of what that buys?
Sure, it's all the core facilities, and you may want to talk about the
Right.
methodology.
So the gymnasium, the media center, the commons, the administrative spaces, the corridors. One of the items that was in the area program that we didn't talk, I think John mentioned it briefly, but we put a gross to net factor in, basically 30% on top of the net area. So all of that collectively accounts for increased commons. In your memo in the packet that we had provided in the area program, we highlighted a methodology where we incrementally increase the core space based on the amount of student capacity. So we took the ed spec was developed around a 1,500 student capacity, 1,500 core, and we expanded it to the 1,750 2000, and there was a method that actually showed how we got to that. And I won't, it's really boring to go through it because it's a math exercise, but it was a way to highlight the increased size, and increased size then connects to increased cost. And that was the methodology for it.
And that's the final piece of the memo that he's referring to is one that Jim authored that was part of the staff report for the, an attachment to the staff report for the high school area program in tonight's packet. So
I just don't know if my colleagues have any sense of where they would land on that one, because I'm
Thank you
very
for
up
actually
in the
asking
air.
it, because before we wrapped up, I wanted to make sure, because we aren't going to have a discussion before we come together and vote on this, so staff are going to need some kind of sense of what this resolution should look like to come back to us. So I'd like everybody to weigh in on that if they could.
I'll go.
Thank you.
I don't have an issue with recommendation. I think, as the gentleman from the Accountability Committee suggests, this is the moment in time during the process that we actually make decisions like this, and I think it's perfectly appropriate. I, of course, am relying a great deal on the expertise of that committee and the expertise of our staff to inform us on what are the best choices in front of us at this point. One of the some of the things that I do worry about, one is I don't in a few years want to hear about value engineering. I don't want to hear about we made this decision in 2013 and now it's a little bit more expensive and we're going to have to cut some costs. I think you were referring to that. But I also know we don't have our crystal ball here. The other piece too, and Bobby, this is maybe specifically to your question. One of the things that I hear, particularly with these pretty significant publicly funded bond efforts, is as soon as the kids move in, the building is full, and or the building is obsolete, or the building doesn't work the way they expected because of X, Y, Z. And if I were to have one wish with my magic wand, it would be that we don't hear that. And one of those things we can actually affect now by saying, build it bigger, build the capacity, obviously, to grow based on a logical projection. But yeah, so I don't have any particular conflict with the recommendation. But again, I want to make sure that we're not in a couple years down the road talking about value engineering and trying to cut corners in places where we probably shouldn't have.
So what I'm hearing is no complaining later from staff about the
complaining.
dollars you're giving us to work with.
Right.
Make it work. Okay.
Others? Steve, yeah. Go ahead.
I have complete confidence that you are making the right decisions probably within the building. I don't have much confidence with our ability to predict the numbers. And that's a real big problem for me, because we've got Roosevelt, which is often a school that takes it in the head anyhow, and we're knocking them lower. And based on some numbers, which I don't think we really have any, I just don't think we did the numbers right even. I mean, I just didn't sound like we were confident in the numbers. So I'm not confident in the numbers. So I don't know exactly what to do. I'll have to think about it, I guess.
Well, and I can put a little postscript to that, which is, as the demographers would say, any further than 5 years out, and the children haven't even been born yet.
Sure.
So,
I don't have any idea. That's why
and they're the
I'm worried
professionals
about 'em.
upon which we're relying in order to do the best effort.
But those people's predictions aren't going to be very good either. That's why, I mean, we're really stuck in a spot where we really don't know about that Roosevelt neighborhood and what's going to turn around and what's going to happen. And so we're shortchanging it slightly by building it smaller. And I'm not sure that's what we want to do, but I honestly I can't predict it. I don't know. I'm worried about it.
So do you want to hear from each of us, is that?
Yes, please.
So, first of all, I just want to again, thank the staff, but mostly at this time for just catching this. I mean, here we have all these changing numbers and bringing this to our attention so that we can do something about it now versus when Matt says, after we've already got them open and there are too many students. So I appreciate that. And I also, I'm not a construction expert, and I rely on you, and I rely on the Bond Accountability Committee, whose work I appreciate, to come to us and tell us what this looks like, at least as far as the construction part of it and the numbers and the money, not the number of students, but the money part. Appreciate that. And then to follow up with Steve, predicting the numbers is, we can't predict the numbers. So I think that it's in our best interest to build to what you are suggesting. And then, again, I'll mention the lever that we have with boundary changes, that we can also work with that in order to maybe overcome any extra in population that we might see, or a decrease. I mean, we just don't know. Crystal ball. So.
Yeah, also appreciate the work on this. I'm a teeny bit perplexed when the long range committee says the first lever is boundary change and transfer, and the memo says we're not considering that. So it makes me scratch my head a bit. I think that one thing that we have to do is keep faith with the voters. Certainly, if we can pull this off and we're successful, we'll have more than kept faith with the voters, because we're giving them more than what we told them for the same price. In terms of the numbers on the Roosevelt, I share everybody's concerns about that, and I want to take some more time to think about it and hear some input, which is one reason why we're not voting on it tonight. But the direction of where we're going and making these high schools have a larger capacity, I think, is a good one.
So, thank you again for this work. It's really great. I would like to piggyback on what Director Curler was saying about this is a really great opportunity, and I think we're moving in the right direction, but I also don't think I can make a decision quite yet. I still need to think about it a little bit, because although I think we're on the right track, like people have been saying, it's really hard for anyone to predict, and I think it's just something I'm going to have to think about here more.
I like what the contractor said, just put your pants on and go to work. You gotta make a decision, you can't put it off.
That's actually a good recommendation regardless.
Well, we have naked bike rides.
Director Regan. No, I was just going to comment on our process.
So first of all, I'm glad we're not voting tonight, and I think that you started the conversation that led us to slow this down a little bit, because I definitely want to hear from community members who have been really engaged in this before saying where I'm finally at. In general, I'm very supportive of moving forward with building a larger core. I think it's short-sighted to not do that. I, at this point, don't believe I'm open to doing the Roosevelt core to 2,000 when we only have 900 kids at this point. And even though it's a low capture rate, that's doubling the size of the building. Doesn't seem like it makes sense to me. But I'm open to hearing what the community thinks about that. I would say my immediate concern would be the classroom capacity build-out that's being proposed for grant at 1750, when the expectation is that when we finish the building There will be 1,690 kids. That's only 2 extra classroom spaces for Grant High School. I don't know why we wouldn't build it out another couple of classrooms to have a little bit more fudge room there. So that one doesn't make sense to me. I guess that's where I'm at this point.
I just wanted to make it clear that we're not giving you any directions. Because in order for us to give you directions, we have to vote. But
Correct.
what we're doing is giving you our suggestions, and that's different than getting directions from the board.
Well, on
Correct.
Thank you.
On October 1st, we're going to vote. and
That's
so
right. And
they-
whatever they come back with, we'll vote on or make amendments.
Right, and
So I
we
just
have a better
wanted to
chance
clear
of them
that.
giving us something that.
If
we're
we
gonna
give
vote
them
on.
something, right, I just wanted to make it clear, because you had, yes, it's semantics, but it's also an important point.
So I guess to add my voice to this, I think this is the right direction. I think, to Tom's point about holding faith with the voters, and to Matt's point about not overbuilding but underbuilding, we don't have a crystal ball. We're never going to have a crystal ball. And so it could very well be that something changes dramatically. But I think that the numbers that I've seen, based on what we have, makes sense. And I think, as we went through the bond campaign, and I heard people talk about, oh, you're building palaces, they're going to be lush, they're going to be over. And other people were like, wait, it's not big enough. Like, our numbers. So this begins to more strike that balance, which again, we knew we had to strike a balance when we went out to voters. And I think that there could be that come in the next 4 years or 5 years, when people start to see these facilities, that the next group of schools people might say, you know what, we need to go bigger. Or they might say, you know what, that's the right size. Because I think about, if we built Roosevelt to a certain size, it's going to compel us to want to make sure it's a full building, which people in our community have also said we value neighborhood schools, and we can redraw boundaries until that whole North Portland all goes to one school. But to people that are living somewhere else, it's not going to feel like a neighborhood school, and so we do have to strike this balance of size. And I don't know that we'll have a crystal ball. So I'm generally comfortable, or I am comfortable with the numbers you've presented in that direction. Obviously, I'm open to other information if something comes available, but I can't imagine what information I'm going to get in the next week that's going to change this for me. So thank you. We are going to move on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The board will now consider the remaining items on the business agenda, with Resolution 4806, which was the one we just discussed, withdrawn. Ms. Houston, are there any other changes to the business agenda? No. Do I have a motion and a second to adopt the business agenda?
Do you want me to do a segregation vote at the end, like we were talking about with an amendment, not at the beginning?
Correct. So
Okay, that's fine.
We'll get
So
that
moved.
business.
Okay.
Director Knowles moves to approve the business agenda. Director Curler seconds to adopt the business agenda. Ms. Houston, is there any public comment on the business agenda? No, there's not. Director Buell, at this point is when people would make amendments
You
to the
wanna
business
do,
agenda. Is there any other
Well,
discussion?
yes, I'd like to move that NCS Pearson Incorporated number 60142 be segregated.
I'll second that.
Okay. So we have a move to amend the business agenda to remove from current consideration the new contract in Resolution 4805, NCS Pearson, Inc. contract for $400,000.
No, to vote on it separately.
Right.
not
So
remove-
it's
is-
going to.
You're talking about
We're just
removing it.
going to
that's
remove
fine.
it at this
Okay.
point, and it'll become its own. Yep.
Okay.
So with that contract removed, are there any other discussions about our business agenda?
Yes, I have a question.
Okay.
U.S. Department of Education Race to the Top funds. I'd like to know what we are getting and what our responsibilities are, because we had the big fight over the Race to the Top funds, not when I was on the board, but previously. It was even brought into the newspaper and stuff, and it was an incredible stuff. And here we're back with the Race to the Top funds again. And I just want to be careful that we're doing what are we going to get for these? And what are our costs for these? In other words, what do we have to do And what are we going to get out of the race to the top? Let's deal with, we've got it with, just to kind of help the people in the audience who may not have, we're going together with Beaverton, Salem, and Eugene to do something, but I don't know what it is.
So this is actually on the revenue contract, and it reflects a grant application that we've not yet submitted, but makes it visible that we're in discussion and preparation to submit as part of a consortium, as Director Buell just indicated, with Salem, Eugene, Beaverton, and Portland. And it is to create a college and career readiness consortium between the 4 largest districts. And it is a grant. We were in discussions in one of the previous rounds for a Race to the Top application with Portland Association of Teachers on a different application. This one actually, the core of it started with Eugene's application, and then and Salem. They both did independent applications focused on college and career readiness. They then subsequently invited Beaverton and Portland to participate in the conversations to see if we could, as the 4 largest districts, really collaborate about what we're doing to prepare students for college and career readiness. It dovetails with some of the work that we're each independently doing in our own districts, and we have the opportunity to tailor it to our own districts. It does require that all 4 districts have the participation and the sign on both of your mayor of our respective cities, us as a school district, and our teachers association. So, and the teachers associations of all 4 districts have been in communication with one another. It's one that both Eugene and Salem have been, their associations have more deeply been involved in the preparation, because this was a continuation of a previous grant, whereas Beaverton and Portland were more in the conversation, as newcomers to this particular one, but we're really, again, tailoring it to ourselves. So we are in that conversation with PAT and with the city of Portland. So.
And so what do we get out of it, and what do we have to do? What do we get from it? I mean, it's a consortium. What is?
So here's
it's a
what
consortium. Are we going to buy people, and are we going to have to then spend more time training our people? I mean, how does it work?
So Director Buell, did you get the application? I believe staff forwarded that to us. So it's a 133-page that would articulate all the information that we're required to do. And
here's all the stuff I got. Is it in
yeah,
there?
it would have been via email because a question came up, and so they sent it to us all via
133 pages by email?
Yes.
Yeah, you did. And actually, I can get you a copy that's a full copy of the application. And it's actually in draft form at the moment.
What does it do? What does it do, and what do we end up having to do? What do we get out of it, and what do we end up having to do?
So it is, and I'm going to actually ask you to, I'll prepare a copy of the application for you and print it out for you.
Can we table this till next time and add this to our meeting so I can get the information and theoretically read 133 pages, which I don't know.
Did you give me a copy of it?
Well, I don't remember seeing it on the email.
So
I mean, just roughly speaking, part of what we're collaborating on is with the 4 districts, looking at what we're each doing to prepare students for college and career readiness. We're also partnering with the University of Oregon EPIC on college and career readiness assessment tools that we would each be utilizing in order to measure college and career readiness.
So are we giving kids more tests beyond what we're giving them now?
They would be employing some of the assessment tools, yes, as part of this. In terms of what we actually do to participate, some of the requirements for Race to the Top also require us to participate in specific ways that we evaluate our teachers, specific ways we evaluate our superintendents. I mean, so there are requirements that we're signing, which is the substance of the conversation we're engaged in with our Teachers Association. So
in anticipation of Director Buell, you possibly wanting to pull us out, I realize that we can't have 2 amendments without voting. So you had originally amended our original business agenda to remove the NCS Pearson contract to move to its own resolution.
If this has to be okayed by maybe I can get us out of this hole here. I can get myself out. this has to be okayed by our teacher union?
Yes.
Okay, in order to get the grant?
Yes.
Okay, and they haven't okayed it yet?
We're in the conversations.
All right, fine. And the second thing is that if somebody's going to ask me to read 133 pages, and I'm not directing this at you, but I don't want to read it off my computer.
We'll print out a copy.
I mean, I'm 68 years old. My eyes aren't that great. I read off the computer all the time, but if I'm going to read 133 pages on something that's really important to me, I don't want to do it off the computer. I'm sorry. And I don't want to do it off my iPhone either.
I apologize.
So Director Bill, I'll be happy to provide you with a full
Okay,
copy.
that would be great. And why don't I just abstain from voting?
On the business agenda?
On this part of the business
So
agenda.
that's what
the
I'm
big
saying.
one.
So
And then I can,
let-
that'll let us go forward, because I'm sure the vote's going to be 6-0. No.
Let's do this. So let's vote on, all in favor of amending our business agenda by pulling out the NC Pearson contract. All those in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 All those opposed, please indicate by saying no. No. So by a vote of 5-1, I'm sorry, was student representative voting?
Yes.
Yes. By a vote with 5-1 with student representative Davidson voting to remove NCS Pearson from our business agenda to its own resolution. Now, at this point, Director Buell, we can move on and vote on the entire business
I
agenda.
think that's the best for the board.
Okay. Or we can also remove that and make it its own resolution, and you can vote on the rest of the business agenda.
I don't think it makes much difference. Go ahead and do the fastest, which is just go ahead and
Okay.
vote now, abstain from it.
Great. We will now
Save us
vote. We will now vote on the business agenda as amended with NC Pearson Inc. contract for $400,000 removed. All those in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Are there any abstentions?
Abstain.
By a vote of 4-0, with one abstention and Student Representative Davidson voting
Yes.
yes. The business agenda is approved.
Director
Five
Blau, may I say
5 to
something?
0.
No, it was
Oh.
1, 2, 3, 4. 4.
There's 5.
Director Buell. Oh, is it
Abstain.
5? Oh, sorry,
There's
5.
Ruth's missing.
Math. Is it 9 o'clock already? 5-0. Or 5-0 to 1 with student representative, yes.
Could I just, I just wanted to comment on this collaboration with these other districts. And as a general rule, I'm really excited that we are looking at this kind of collaboration. As far as I know, all of these districts have better graduation rates than us. We could probably learn something from them. And what I'm excited about also is that this isn't just about kids graduating, it's about college and career readiness specifically. So I'm wide open to any kind of collaboration like this with other districts.
I'm sorry if I missed you during the comment
Sorry.
period. We will now vote on Resolution 4809, which is the NCS Pearson Inc. contract for, revenue contract for $400,000. Can I get a motion and a second to adopt?
So moved.
Second.
Director Regan moves to adopt Resolution 4809. Director Morton seconds. Is there any board discussion on it? Director Buell?
I'm going to apologize before this, comments on this, because this is before this discussion, because it's going to be just a little bit longer. I want to explain how this works to people in the audience, people on television, and to, I don't know if I need to explain this to board members, maybe I do. The way this kind of stuff, I want to ask first the superintendent, does this deal, because I asked these questions and try and tell the staff ahead of time, and what the things that I got back were kind of unclear a little bit, the response, and this also deals in some way with the proficiency-based House Bill 2220. That's the proficiency that's the proficiency grading stuff.
So what this
So some of this has to do with that?
So what this is specifically a contract for is professional development for over a 3-year period for both teachers and principals in proficiency-based credit, awarding of proficiency-based credit,
Okay.
and also formative assessment. And so it is a contract specifically for professional development and training for our staff.
Does it have to do with the proficiency-based grading, HB 2220?
Proficiency-based grading, yes.
Okay, all right. Then let me explain how this stuff comes about. What happens is you have a group called ALEC, which we know about, which is pretty right-wing group of legislators, national legislation group, and it's legislators all over the country in this group. And large corporations come to those people, and they lobby them and give them money in order for. And what ALEC does then is they come up with templates of legislation across the country, and they send those templates out to different legislators who are in ALEC, and those people then bring those to the state governments and try and get bills passed that have to do with this ultra-conservative, pretty right-wing, even though a lot of other kind of people get involved in this, like our governor was in ALEC, not when he was governor, but previously at one point. And so these then come into state legislatures, and state legislatures make motions. And those motions generally have to do with who the people who gave money and lobbied ALEC was. Now, Pearson, who we're talking about here, is the biggest people in the country that do this. It's a huge corporation, and they have an agenda, and their agenda basically is, we're going to push things that eventually then make us money. And so, if you go back and you think about the cartoon character that Camel used, to try and get their kids involved, or you think of the Happy Meal at McDonald's. Well, Pearson basically does the same type of thing. Now, is this evil? I wouldn't say it's evil. It's business practices. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is business practice. And business practice is to get these things into state legislatures that then they push, which causes people to buy things from Pearson. So we had proficiency-based grading, which doesn't really do anything for our kids. And we got there, and that came through on the sly, 2011 on the sly. Nobody's paying hardly attention to it like they were in the last legislature where people were paying attention to everything. But this kind of slips through, and now they're saying to us, okay, you've got to do this. Even though it's not helpful for our kids, now here's the tricky part, is it's got this germ of truth in it. Wouldn't it be nice to have to understand how my kids were doing in everything without their homework involved maybe, or without their attendance involved? Well, of course it'd be nice. The classic example of this is the stuff that we're doing with teachers that came through, which is we're going to use the children's test scores to evaluate the teachers. That's a classic ALEC move. And so what happens with that is, even though it's no good, and everybody who pays any attention to educational research or educational stuff knows that the test scores are worthless, basically, in evaluating teachers. Everybody knows that, but we still got it through. And so these things come through like that. And so this is another example of coming through the legislature, comes out to us, starts with Pearson or whomever, maybe it's these big, huge corporations that want to make money, and so they push these things through, and they go all the way into state legislature. We don't think about it. We think, oh, it came out of Oregon. No, they come out of, these are national things. And they end up in our legislature. Because you always find somebody, if you're going to give them enough money, or you're going to give them such and such to do these things. So here we get to Pearson, $400,000. And what does it do? It deals with proficiency-based grading, which came out of the legislature, which probably came out of ALEC, though I'm not sure, came out of someplace, and came eventually from probably Pearson to begin with. This thing's around. Now, I think somebody has to say no to this kind of stuff. No, this isn't good for our kids necessarily, even though it has this germ of truth in it. And what I say about it is not just no, it's not good because of this system. It's no because we can't afford it. We don't have $400,000 to put into taking this stuff and dealing with our teachers and trying to get them to understand proficiency-based grading. Let's go down to Medford, I think, has a pretty good plan. Let's go down and just borrow their plan. Let's give them $10,000, so we save $390,000. Or let's hire our own person for $100,000 and give them a $47,000 budget, $1 for each kid, and then have them come up with a plan. But coming up with this spending $400,000 is not what we can afford. Think what you could do with $400,000. We could put a half-time librarian, certificated librarian, in every one of our 8 bottom K-8 schools, bottom in terms of test scores, K-8 schools, in all 8 of those schools, we could put in a half-time librarian for $400,000. I mean, it would be an incredible thing. Anybody who does research knows that the best thing for teaching kids to read is to have a certificated librarian in there. So instead of spending $400,000 for certificated librarians, which by the way would not benefit Pearson Education at all, Pearson Education doesn't get benefited by anything that goes directly to kids, and they don't get benefited by any time you add staff. They don't get anything out of that. So it comes around and we're handing them $400,000, which we could really spend someplace else. We can't afford this. I'm going to vote no on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Buell. Any other comments? Okay, well now.
Well, I share Director Buell's concern about ALEC for sure. I don't know or understand that Pearson is completely tied to them, but I have huge concern.
They're not completely, but they do.
Yeah, I have huge concern about ALEC also. I think it's something that we all need to be aware of and be paying attention to. I'm not sure I see the direct correlation here.
Okay. Director Curler?
I guess I have a question for Superintendent Smith. So if we all voted no on this, what's the impact to us, to our students, and to the district?
So I'm going to say that I think proficiency-based credit allows us to be responsive to students in terms of really assessing where they are in their learning and continuing to provide opportunities for them to gain proficiency. So I think we have a deep interest in having our staff and our instructional leadership trained in a common means of assessing that, regardless of whether we have this in the legislature or not. It's something that it's a direction we're interested in moving as a district in terms of what meets the needs of kids. The other thing I'll say, would we invent another way to figure out how to do this? Yes. The opportunity to work with the 2 people, Rick Stiggins and Ken O'Connor, who we would be doing through this professional development, is a great opportunity. So Rick Stiggins is somebody local. ATI is the Company Assessment Training Institute that was acquired by Pearson. So we had a relationship with them prior to them being acquired by Pearson, and they've been a good professional development opportunity for us that meets our needs. So would we invent another way to do it? Well, we would figure out another way to do it. So,
Director Buell?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure 2 things. One, this didn't necessarily come from ALEC. That's a typical thing. So I'm not, this is a typical ALEC thing, though. This is where this is how it works. And the other thing is, I've heard wonderful things about Rick Stiggins, and this is not in any way. I just want to make sure it's never in any way directed at him. He's a guy I'd love to have. I think he's a great guy to have working with us from what I can make out from friends I have who really know him. And he was one of the early guys in Oregon Save Our Schools that they talked about, hey, this guy does some really good research. This guy does some good stuff. So that's it. I just don't think we can afford it. Part of our job as the stewards of the money, we can't afford this. If we can afford, let's take this money and put it where it makes more sense.
So can I make 2 other comments?
Sure, and then we're going to go to a vote.
Then we'll go to a vote. Just one that I also appreciate Director Buell's concerns about ALEC and impact. So that one, I totally appreciate that. And the other one is just the impact of having professional development that we're providing in a system our size, the ability to provide consistent professional development of something we're trying to move across an entire system is an invaluable investment of getting the consistency of practice across the system. So, and the opportunity for people to work on that. So that's the other place that I also would say it's an investment in our folks and in improving our practice.
I know you want to vote, but let me make one more comment, and then we're home free.
No, we're moving on to a vote.
I just wanted to comment on.
Nope,
we
not
didn't,
recognized on the floor.
400,000.
We're now going to vote on
I have an easy way to do-
4809
I'll save you
NC Pearson
300,000.
Inc. contract for $400,000. All those in favor, please indicate by saying yes. Yes. All those opposed, please indicate by saying no.
No.
Resolution 4809 NC Pearson revenue contract for $400,000 is passed by a vote of 5-0, with student representative Davidson voting
Yes.
yes. Thank you. So there's been a request for a call to the vote. Ms. Houston, can you call off roll call so that we can vote individually, please?
So it's 5 yes and 1 no.
Director Regan?
Yes. Director Morton?
Yes.
Director Curler?
Yes.
Director Knowles?
Yes.
Director Buell?
Yeah, no.
Chair Belial?
Yes. Resolution passes by a vote of 5-0, with student representatives still voting
Yes.
yes. Thank you. The next meeting of the board will be a business meeting on Tuesday, October 1st, 2013 at 12 noon. This meeting of the board is now adjourned.